Okay, good morning. Good morning. It is 8 o'clock on Wednesday morning. Somebody give me today's date. 29th? 28th. I'm saying this out loud because there's a recording. I record the sessions, and so when you open up the recording, you want to know which one it is. So
August 20th.
August 20th. Thank you, Lance. I appreciate that. August 20th. So, good morning. Does anybody remember what we were talking about yesterday?
Marketing.
We're talking about marketing. Excuse me, Adam, let me write that down.
Customer decisions, guiding influences and factors.
Wow.
Okay. So Evan says customer decisions, guiding influences and factors. Anything else that we talked about yesterday? Did anybody
5
remember?
C's.
Who
5
said?
C's.
5 C's, which were what?
Company, context, competition, customers.
And collaborate. Okay, so right, so we're talking about. So anybody else remember anything else that we talked about yesterday?
SDP.
4 P's we talked about. Okay, you guys are good. This is all these things. Okay. So as a review of where we're coming from and where we're going, what's important is that we walk away from this course having a framework for thinking about the kinds of questions that we need to be asking ourselves as we put together a marketing strategy and a marketing plan. And what we said yesterday is, in its simplest sense, we can think about marketing as being the part of the business that drives the growth, that brings in the revenue. And we said a way to think about that is the role of marketing is all about facilitating that exchange with customers. And in the broader sense, we can think about our goal of marketing as being acquiring and retaining and developing profitable customers. And we said that the way in which we're going to do this is we're going to understand customers first. We'll understand how it is that consumers make decisions and what's important to them and what they value. And then what we're going to do in our businesses is we're going to create that value for them. And the way that we're going to create that value is we're going to create a marketing mix. And that marketing mix is the decisions that we make about the 4 Ps. So what will the product be? What will the features and attributes of the product be? What will be the products that we sell in the product line? We will make those decisions about products because they provide value to customers that we expect will want to make an exchange with us. So we make those decisions about products. We make decisions about pricing, we make decisions about promotion, we make decisions about where the products are available and when the products are available, so we call that place, decisions about distribution. And so we're going to make those 4 decisions in a way that creates value for customers, and then if we're doing this right in the long run, hopefully we're able to extract some of that value for the business. And ideally, the way in which we're going to do this is that the prices that we sell our products for are greater than the cost in order to produce them. That creates a contribution that we can have for the business that ultimately should lead to future investment and finally be able to lead to profit. And then we said, if we're going to do this, we don't just want to make these decisions in a vacuum. I want to sell grilled cheese sandwiches out of a cart someplace, and the reason why I'm doing it is because I like grilled cheese sandwiches and I think everybody's going to like them. But instead, I want to be purposeful and thoughtful about how I make my decisions about what my product should be, how I should go about pricing, how I should promote, and how I should distribute. And we said then long before we think about making those decisions, we should think about what do we know, first of all, about ourselves, because that will influence what we're able to do in terms of our decisions about investments in the product, how we price, how we promote, how we distribute. So we can ask ourselves some questions about the company. What are the goals that the company has? What are the skills or the core competencies that the company can lean into in order to provide a strategic competitive advantage? What are the assets that are available to me? Clearly, there are going to be some kinds of marketing strategies that might be successful, a mix of product, price, place, and distribution, that might be successful, but that might require a large investment of resources that the business simply doesn't have. And so we want to think about what are the assets that are available to the business. What are the liabilities that the business might already face? That can influence whether or not we might decide for our business it makes sense to go after a particular group of customers with a particular mix of product, price, place, and promotion. And once we've answered those questions, we might also think about what are the values that the business has, because there might be particular values that are important to the business that might influence some of the decisions that we make. And so I'll give an example of this. Right out the window, I see a place called Chick-fil-A. You can go up and press your noses against the glass if you're a Chick-fil-A fan. And I have noticed that when I drive by Chick-fil-A on Sunday, there's nobody there. They're closed. They're closed on Sundays. And so I'm going to guess, given the popularity of Chick-fil-A, that they could sell a whole bunch of chicken sandwiches if they would be willing to be open on Sunday. And I don't have the data on this, but I imagine that they don't make up for the lost sales of chicken sandwiches on Sunday by selling more on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I imagine, I don't know for sure, but I imagine that the overall profitability for the business could be higher if they were open on Sunday. But they're not. And they're not open on Sundays, not because of reasons solely about profitability, but reasons about the values that the business has. So Chick-fil-A has a value statement that is associated with providing some time off on Sundays for their employees to either worship as they see fit or spend time with their families. And that's something that's important to them. And then that influences then the decisions. If we think about decisions about place, and if we think about place as distribution in terms of time as well, they have made a decision based on values. And so we can think about that as being important as we ask ourselves questions about our company. What is it that we're willing to do or not willing to do that might also influence this? Then we have to ask ourselves some questions about the context. Right? There are things that are going on outside of the business that are not in our control that might influence and provide opportunities for us that might not have otherwise been there, or on the other hand might provide threats to our business. And so we spent some time yesterday talking about the technological change of the GLP-1s. So suddenly there's this new chemical that's available that changes consumer behavior. A large percentage of consumers now able to be more healthy. This is very good, but it has influences on a lot of businesses. Influences on the insurance industry, influence on the restaurant industry, influence on the snack food industry, convenience stores, travel industry, clothing industry, all of these ripple effects that could create opportunities. Right? So the exercise athletic wear companies are doing actually quite well as a result of this because a lot more people are changing their clothes and getting into more fitness-oriented activities. On the other hand, there are other businesses that are suffering. So if you're in the snack food industry, if you're not suffering, you're quite concerned about the changes in behaviors. And we saw it, for instance, in the restaurant industry where there's decline for a variety of reasons, but decline in purchases of larger quantities, and so the restaurants are having to adjust. And that means as a result of this contextual change, you can see that what they've done is that they've made a change to the product as a result of this contextual change. And so we can see these contextual changes be political and legal things like tariffs. They can be technological things like GLP-1 or artificial intelligence. They can be social changes that might be taking place, so people's consumer attitudes toward a variety of different topics. So, for example, in the theme park industry, there's a theme park that you're probably familiar with called SeaWorld. And back about 10 years ago, there was a movie that came out that was about the way in which the orca whales are treated by those theme parks, and that as a result, led to a social change in attitudes towards seeing animal shows at theme parks, and the rate at which people attended SeaWorld compared to all of the other theme parks declined. That caused the stock value to decline, and that was a social change that happened, and that led to the folks at SeaWorld saying, we have to reposition what it is that we are offering. So in the past, what they offered was family entertainment by creating these spectacles of look at what these animals can do, and they changed the way in which they provide their positioning. Now they're about having fun, but learning about protecting the environment. And so if you look at the names of all of their, not all of their, but many of their roller coasters and things that they have are about like sea rescue and, I don't know what the other names are, but sea escape or something like this. And they've also changed the animal shows to be much more informative about what it is that the animals do in their natural environments, rather than watch this animal jump through hoops and do things that are unnatural. All of these things because of a social change that influenced the industry. So we've got political, legal, environmental, economic, social, technological changes that are contextual things that are going on that influence our ability to extract profit with particular mixes of product, price, promotion, distribution. So we also said we need to think about the competition, recognizing who the competition is right now. So who is it that consumers would choose if they were not choosing our products? But also thinking about the fact that if we launch something new, if we start a new industry, it's also possible that competitors will show up. They will recognize that there's opportunity, and we want to be thoughtful about drawing that competition. So potentially we might make decisions early on, right, about, let's see if my laser will work here. If I think that my product is going to be difficult to differentiate from a competitor and difficult to beat in terms of cost, but I also think that my product, once someone purchases my product, is unlikely to now purchase multiple units of it, then the strategy that I might have is one where I offer the product initially at a lower price. Make my laser work. I'm pointing the price up there. Imagine there's a red dot on that. And I'm looking at a way maybe perhaps I'm offering at a lower price. Maybe I make less profit per unit, but that ensures that I'm able to sell those products into the marketplace and makes it less likely that a competitor would see it as an advantageous place for them to come into the market, because they might not see the same level of profits at a price that's as low as the price that I'm offering. So the decisions that I might make about the price, the product, promotion, distribution, of course, are going to be influenced by who the competition is. And then I think about the collaborators, so I might need to rely on specialists to help me with my advertising. I want to be sure that I'm going to be able to have the quantity supplied, so I want to have those suppliers available to me. I want to make sure that I've got access to distribution. All of these are collaborators that might give me the ability to sell through products in a way that is consistent with providing value to customers and extracting that value for the business. So that's what we spent time talking about yesterday. And today I want to spend time talking about consumers. So thinking about how consumers make decisions. And so we're going to be working on, at least for the first part of today, we're going to be working through one method by which businesses can go about understanding consumer preferences, what's important to them, the value that they place on them, so that we can make predictions about the choices that consumers would be likely to make. And this exercise is useful for a number of reasons. It's useful because it helps us understand a little bit more about how marketing decisions are made, helps us understand a little bit more about how consumers value products, but it's also useful because it's going to give us practice and skill working with data and understanding a little bit more about how experiments are designed, which can be useful even if you're not a marketing person and you go in and you're working in other areas. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about this problem that I have today. So this is a picture of a restaurant. Does anybody recognize this restaurant? So I will tell you now a little personal story about myself before I move forward. After I graduated from UT, my first job was at Columbia University, which is like right near where this restaurant is in Manhattan. And I used to walk by there every day on my way to work or home from work. And at the time, this dates me a little bit. This was before cell phones, people taking, even the word selfie I don't think existed yet at that time, back in about 1999 to 2000, in that period of time. But people had digital cameras at that time. And you always, when you walk by the corner, I would see people taking pictures of this restaurant because it's iconic. And I would say to people, would you like me to take your picture so that you're in it? And they would, of course, they'd say, yes, of course they would. And so then I would take their picture with the restaurant behind them. And so I believe that of every person in the United States, I've taken more pictures of this restaurant than anybody else because of the time that I was there. So I feel that's a little claim to fame that I have. But the reason why I'm showing
Is that your photo?
it's not my photograph. My photo exists distributed on people's cameras. I don't actually have a copy of any of them. So I took them, I don't have them. Yeah. So I'm imagining, just for the sake of the argument that we're going to go through today, and the exercise we'll do today, let's imagine that I would like to start a restaurant. That's what my goal is. And I'm at the point where I think that starting a restaurant makes sense. I think that there's potential for profit in this particular marketplace in order to start this restaurant. And I'm down to making some level of decisions about this restaurant. And the decisions are these. So first, I want to know something about what cuisine I should serve at the restaurant. So should I have Thai food, or should I have Mexican food, or should I have barbecue food? And clearly, I want to offer the one that's going to be able to deliver customers to my business. But I also, at some point, I'm going to think about what it costs me to do this, because there's an investment that I'm going to make. I don't know how to cook Thai food. I don't know how to cook Mexican food. I don't know how to do this. So I'm going to have to hire a chef, and that probably means that I'm going to have to set up my kitchen in a particular way. If I've got Thai food, the kinds of equipment that I have might be different from the kinds of Mexican. So there's investments that need to be made, and I want to make those investments in a way that are going to be efficient. And I also realize that if customers could care less, if people don't care what kind of food that they're eating, if it's not an important attribute to them, then maybe I shouldn't spend my resources investing a lot in having the perfect Thai kitchen if they could care less about it. Maybe I should put my money into some other aspect of the restaurant that people do care about. So part of what I want to understand is what's important to consumers, and then beyond what's important to them, which level of the item that I'm offering is important to them, and how do they value it. So another question that I have is about the service of the restaurant. So will I set it up so that it's got table service, where I have a waiter that comes to their table, or it's got counter service where people walk up to the counter and they ask for what it is that they want. And I'm well aware that table service is going to cost me more. That means that I have to pay a wait staff, and the way in which I'm organized is going to be more expensive. Counter service is less expensive for me. I can just get somebody who's a single person who stands at the counter, maybe somebody who goes out and cleans the tables. And so if it's up to me, and customers don't care about the quality of the service, I would rather go with the less expensive one. But if customers do care, then I'm going to have to choose one that might cost me more. I'm also thinking about what price point to offer in the marketplace. So we can imagine a lunch. Maybe the cost is going to be $10. That's the price that I'll charge. Maybe it'll be $12.50. Maybe it'll be $15. And if consumers in this market are not price sensitive, at least in this range of prices, then I'd rather charge the $15 because I would rather have more of that money for my business. But if consumers are price sensitive, then I'm going to be a little bit more thoughtful. Maybe I'm willing to have fewer customers and charge a higher price. On the other hand, maybe if I need those customers, maybe I can be more profitable if I charge a lower price. And so I'm really thoughtful about what price it is that I should charge. And it's going to be valuable to me to understand how important, in a way, I'm thinking about how important is money to these consumers. If they're not price sensitive, then in a way, then the difference between $10 and $15 doesn't make a difference. And while most people would say, yeah, between 10 and 15 kind of makes a difference, most people would also say between $10 and $10.01, I could care less. And so there are ranges in which people might be less price sensitive. We might want to know something about that. And then lastly, I'm sort of thinking about where the restaurant is likely to be. So this is sort of a distribution question about location. And I've scouted out some places, so here we are in the Macomb School of Business over here, and I've got a place right down here that's just 5 minutes away, and another one up the street that's 10 minutes away, another one way out there that's 15 minutes away. And it also turns out that the rent is more expensive at the closer one, the rent is less expensive at the one that's farther away. But if people could care less about how far they're going to have to walk or drive the car, I'd rather choose the one that's farther away. If the distance, and in a way that consumers' time is more important to them, I need to know that because that will influence how likely I am to sell products. Does everybody understand sort of what my problem is? I've got, in a way, as I just want to point out, there's really 4 attributes that I have here. There's the cuisine, there's the service type, there's the price, and there's the distance. Those are sort of 4 attributes. And then I can think about within each attribute, there are different levels, different values that that attribute can take. And I'm going to call them levels, and I'm calling them levels because that's the nomenclature that tends to be used in conjoint analysis, which is what we're working on. So I've got 3 levels of cuisine. So the levels are Thai and barbecue and Mexican. I've got 3 levels of price. That makes sense, 10, 12, 15, 15. And 3 levels of distance, 5, 10, 15 minutes away. And 2 levels of service, which is the counter service or the table service. So that's what I'm working with in terms of my attributes. So when I think about making, this is a decision largely about a product, but you can see right away in this decision about the product, I've also got elements of place and distribution and elements of price. I want to know the answer to questions like this, which will help me decide what cuisine I should have, what price I should charge, where I should locate the restaurant. Yeah, Michael.
When you use the word levels, is there any ranking, or is it just defining an option?
So the term levels is often used even when there isn't ranking, but that is going to be important to us, so I like that you brought up this question, because when we go to analyze the data, that will actually be an important thing that we're going to come back to. Yeah. But it's just the term level is often used, but it really doesn't, it just means the categorical value. I wish they had not used the word level. It would be better for all of us. So I want to know the answers to questions like this. In my market of consumers, what are the most important attributes and the least important attributes? I want to know specific questions like how much do people prefer table service to counter service? Do people care about how far it is that they need to travel? And then, if I've got choices, maybe I can think about the combination of attribute levels that I should include in the market in order to get the most possible market share. And there might already be other restaurants that exist in the area. Just like for any product that I can launch, there might already be other products that are in the market. I'm thinking about introducing something new, and I want to start to think about which configuration of a product might I introduce that will allow me to gain the most market share? Which configuration will allow me to gain the most profit? And I want to get also an understanding about what demand might look like at different prices. And so that will allow me to get an estimate about what price sensitivity is. Did you take an economics class?
Yes.
You did take it. So when you talked about demand, what was the last bit?
Ish.
Ish, right? You took it.
Yes.
Okay, so then I didn't ask, did you learn all about economics?
It was economic.
Oh, economic ish. Okay, so economic ish.
We learned a lot about prisoners of war, that's good.
You learned about prisoners of war. Did you learn about price elasticity?
Yes.
Okay, some people
Those words
were Okay, so we will talk more about price elasticity because that is something that we want to get an understanding of. Price elasticity, very, very simple concept it actually turns out. It's just a way of describing how sensitive consumers are to changes in price at a particular point on the demand curve, and it really is just a ratio. If I change the price, this is going to go in the denominator, if I change the price by some percent, how much does the demand change in terms of percentage? And so all price elasticity is the percent change in demand divided by the percent change in price. And we'll come back to that, but this would be useful for me to understand How much does demand change relative to changes in price? Because that might help me decide what price it is that I should charge in order to extract the most value for the business. And so it's going to depend. The answers to these questions is going to depend on consumers' preferences. So it's going to depend on what's inside their heads. What do they want? What are their value systems? What's important to individual consumers? So I could go to Sebastian and I could find out. Mind Sebastian? Sure. Find out like how important is the cuisine, and how important is the price, and how important is the kind of service. And if I understood for this individual how important these items are and how he valued them, Sebastian was representative of the entire population that I'm trying to estimate, then I can just use his preferences. But instead, what I want to do is I want to do that for a number of different individuals who are representative of the overall population, and I can use their preferences to make estimates about what would happen with everybody else. So what I want to do is I'm going to run a sort of experiment within each individual in my sample. And the experiment is going to help me understand for each individual, for Sebastian for instance, how important is each attribute, and what is the value that he places on each attribute and each level of each attribute. And then if I can do that for Sebastian, and I can understand how important are the levels, the value that he places on each attribute, I might also then for Sebastian be able to make estimates about which choices he would make, assuming he would choose the one that we believe that he likes the best. If I can estimate what his choices are, and I can do that for Indra as well, and I can do it for Sarah, and I can do it for Michael, I can get estimates about what individuals in my sample would choose. I can then use that to extrapolate as to what the market share might be likely to be overall in the population before I've actually spent the money and built this restaurant. So potentially I may make different choices about what my product should be, how I should price, how I should promote, how I should distribute. Different choices before I design the restaurant and spend the money in a way that likely will be able to bring me the most possible either market share or profit or whatever the goal is of the business. Right? And so what that means is that it's going to depend ultimately on what the preferences are that lie within each consumer. And so I'm going to make an assumption, and I don't think it's a bad assumption, but it is an assumption of the model that we're going to make, is that we can think about when you go to a restaurant, and you then walk away from that restaurant, and say, well, here's how I would rate that restaurant on a scale of 1 to 7 or a scale of 1 to 9. I give it 8 stars, or 8 points, or 8, a score of 8 out of 9 points. And we can sort of think about that as being your overall value that you get from the restaurant. The total of the value, we can sort of think about that as Y at the end as being the total value that you get when you evaluate any alternative. And then we can say, well, where does that rating come from? Because you don't rate everything an 8. Some things you rate a 4, and some things you rate a 7. So where does that overall value, we can almost think about it as overall utility, come from? It comes from the little bits of value that you get from each of the attributes that that alternative has. So the reason why you rated the restaurant an 8 is because of something about the food, and something about the service, and something about the atmosphere, and something about the cleanliness of the bathrooms perhaps, and maybe something about the price that you paid for what it is that you got. And you put all of those little bits of worth together to get the overall worth that you have for the alternative. And so for the sake of discussion and the nomenclature that we use in conjoint analysis, we're going to refer to the overall utility. We can think about that as the overall value, the estimated rating. And we're going to think about that as coming from little bits of worth. The level, the value that we place on each one of the attributes, and we're going to call those little bits of worth part worths. That's the terminology. Part worths just represent the little bits of worth that we place on each one of the levels of the attributes, which when we add them all up, become the overall utility. And so I'm gonna assume that this is the way that this works, is that there's the presence of a particular level of an attribute. So we'll go back to Sebastian again, and we say, well, it's a Thai restaurant, is the kind of restaurant that it is. And let's say for discussion, do you like Thai restaurants? You do love Thai food. Okay, so a high rating on Thai food, so that would increase the overall utility. And then I say, and the price is only $10, is that good? So it likes $10, so that also maybe increases the utility. And the service is counter service where you have to walk up, so compared to table service, is that good or bad? You prefer walking up to having someone wait on you? True. Okay, all right, so that actually increases, you're very easy.
Sure. I know you guys.
You had it at let's just say, let's say the distance is 15-minute walk. Does that make it better than 5 minutes or worse?
$10.
A little bit worse. And so now the rating comes down, and we piece all those things together, and we get overall. So I'm going to make that assumption that this is how it works. Okay. So that's what we want to do. So I'm gonna pause for a second, and we're gonna have a little fun.
Still stuck on the well.
So, Sebastian, I'm gonna hold on to you for a while, so you don't get to participate in this, because we're gonna work together for a while more. But I need a volunteer. It's so easy to participate today. You just raise your hand. You're willing to be a volunteer. So I'm gonna go with Brian and Randy, who saw his hands. I saw Evan. Don't worry.
No, it hurt.
No, Evan, you also have a special place, okay? So don't worry.
Evan's you're our special boy. Evan's answers are long anyway.
Okay, so just for fun, we're gonna do it. So Randy, you're up first. If you don't mind. I would like you to tell me about a restaurant that you have in the market. So let's imagine that Randy is a proprietor, restaurant owner. If anybody wants to eat at Randy's place. First of all, tell me what the name of your restaurant is.
Randy's Place.
Randy's Place is.
Or you start playing Randy's.
Okay, right, so it is.
Better than restaurant.
Why don't we just call it Randy's?
Ooh,
Randy's.
yeah, we're gonna class it up, we're gonna call it Randall's.
You want to call it Randall's?
Let's go with the church.
Okay.
Yeah, the church restaurant.
ALS, is that how you want to do it? Randall's?
I don't know.
Randall's or Randall's? Randall's Place.
ELS,
Okay.
Randall's.
Oh, Randall's.
It's a bridge place.
And I'm gonna
Black tie on.
stand by, I'm just gonna change this. You guys can see it. Color is too rich for the screen. Okay, so Randall, tell me about your restaurant. What kind of food are you gonna sell? And you only get to sell barbecue, Mexican, or Thai.
Barbecue then.
Okay, so not,
French barbecue.
okay, and then what price do you charge for a typical plate of lunch?
$20.
It's a cheat
You
day.
can charge 10, 12, 50, or 15. What number?
Change the name back to Randall's.
What price?
15.
So you're a $15 restaurant. Okay, and then you have counter service or table service.
Table.
Okay, you got table service. And then how far away are you located?
From here,
From here, yeah.
1 mile.
1 mile. Okay, so I'm gonna call that a 15-minute walk. Is that fair?
I guess.
I'm doing it. I'm doing it. This is not meant to be that much thinking, but Randall, I appreciate it. Brian,
I walk fast if I'm getting
now having
barbecue.
learned from Randall, so tell us, first of all, what do you want your restaurant to be?
It's in.
Where do you want it to be?
What do you want the name to be?
The name.
Yeah, Brian
We
Pizza.
call it The Spice.
Oh,
Shots fired.
The Spice. Yeah. Brian's The Spice. Okay. What kind of food are you selling?
Thai fish.
Okay, so you've got Thai house. And then what price are you gonna charge?
$12.50.
$12.50. And then, counter service and table service.
A counter.
So you've got counter service, and now fast, and then how far away are you? 5, 10, or 15 minutes away?
I think 10 minutes.
So you're at 10 minutes. Okay. Now,
Sir.
licking the wounds of hurt feelings. I will bring you back. You and I are gonna go into business together. Okay, so, right, that's right. If we do well, we will share the profits, and if we do poorly, you can have the responsibility if you choose. Do you mind? Okay, so we're gonna call this place, this is the place, it does not exist yet. But this is what our goal is what are we gonna call it, Evan and
That's a
Andy's,
good one.
just that?
Yeah,
It doesn't have to have.
Mexican
a-
restaurant epoxy sin.
It is what it is, yeah, okay. Snack bar. Right, so what kind of food do you wanna have, Mexican, barbecue, or Thai? We
Let's
can
go
have,
Mexican.
okay, we're gonna go with Mexican, so we're gonna do something quite different from everybody else.
Is this authentic Mexican or Tex-Mex?
It's Tex-Mex.
No,
We saw those crispy tacos.
Nothing's.
Right, and what price do you charge? Are we $10, $12.50, or $15?
Let's go 10.
You think we're gonna be inexpensive? Remember, I would like to be profitable. Okay. And then, counter service or table service?
Counter.
Okay, so we've got counter service, and then are we 5, 10, or 15 minutes away?
5.
5 minutes away, so we are close and cheap. Okay, so that makes sense. Now, keep in mind, Randall,
Billboard.
Randy and Brian, their restaurants already exist in the marketplace. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to make decisions about what it is that we're gonna launch into the marketplace in order to maybe get the most market share, potentially get more profit. And one advantage that Evan and I have is that we have not fully decided. This is just a gut feel coming from a management meeting that we just had. You saw what our meetings look like. That's what happens. And so we're gonna be able to maybe make different decisions later on. So how are we gonna decide? We wanna get an estimate about what market share is likely to look like for this particular restaurant configuration. And if we don't like that configuration, we might be able to change it. We wanna get estimates about what profitability is likely to look like for this configuration. If we don't like how much profit we expect to make, then we might be able to make changes. And then we can go back and we can do a little bit more strategic thinking and say, well, if we do launch a particular configuration, where is that market share coming from? Are we taking it from Randy? Are we taking it from Brian? And what do we know about Randy and Brian in their likelihood and ability to react to our taking their market share away? Because maybe we might think about a configuration where we only take a little bit of market share from both. And they're not, they look at their numbers and like, well, maybe we're doing a little bit worse, but we're not sure why. If suddenly one of their market shares took a real dive, we would expect that they would prick up their ears and say something's not right, and they would go walking around to find out where their customers are, and they would find us, and if all we're doing is offering the same thing at a lower price, and Randy's been around, for instance, for a long time, and he's got a lot, very deep pockets and the ability to respond by lowering his price, at least for a period of time, waiting us out until we get driven out of business, maybe that's not the place we want to compete, we might want to make some different decisions. But at a first step, we want to get an estimate about what our market share is going to be, and we want to get an estimate of profitability. So, how do we do that? I'm going to try to understand what consumers' preferences are and what value they place on each of those attributes. From there, I'm going to be able to build up to get estimates about what the overall utility is that individual customers have. If I know what the overall utility is, or an estimate of the utility is for each configuration, I can make an estimate of which alternative that individual will choose. And if I can get that for one person, I can get that for multiple people in the sample, so I can look at what the choices are among multiple people to get an overall estimate of what market share will be. So let's look at how this is done. So how do I get the information about the weights that Sebastian places? What?
Surveys, interviews.
All right, so I can do focus groups, I can do surveys, I can do interviews. So one way that I can do this is, I'm going to stay with Sebastian. Do you mind me hanging out with him here for a while? So go back to Sebastian and say, well, how important is price in your decision? It's very important, and then I could ask you how much you would pay, and I could say, how important is the cuisine in your decision?
6.
You'd say 6, so pretty important to you. And then I could ask you the same questions about the kind of service, and I could ask you the same questions about I already asked you about the price, I could ask you the same questions about the distance, and then I would have estimates about what these are. And in fact, let's, just for fun, let's do this, and we'll sort of think about how this works. So one way that I can do this is I'm going to just ask them about the levels of the attributes and the value that they place on them. So, Sebastian, if I were to offer you a barbecue restaurant that's $10, counter service, and it's 5 minutes away, how would you rate that restaurant on a scale of 1 to 9?
1 to 9?
On a scale of 1 to 9. It's barbecue, it's $10, it's counter service, and it's 5 minutes. You give that an 8. Okay, so that's a pretty high.
Factoring the heights,
that's 9 is the highest you can go, and 1 is, you don't like it at all. Okay, and so now, if I were to change that restaurant, it's not a barbecue, everything else is the same, but now it is a Mexican restaurant instead. Do you like it more or do you like it less?
Bit more.
You look a bit more. So I'm gonna give that a +1, right? And so +1, just 1. So this is the amount that I would change it relative to the base case, which is the barbecue restaurant, $10, counter service 5 minutes away. And then if it were a Thai restaurant instead of a barbecue or Mexican restaurant, would you like it more or would you like it less? And you can like it the same amount.
-2.
Okay, -2. So I'm getting a hint here that your favorite restaurant of the 3, just by looking at this, is probably a Mexican restaurant, then barbecue less, and then Thai even less than that. Okay, so right now the restaurant is $10. If it were $12.50, are you less happy?
Yes,
And by how much?
2.
-2, and then what happens if I change it to $15?
-5.
-5, so you really get quite a bit unhappy about this. And I'm gonna point something out which is gonna become important later on. Let me in fact show you at least with this method here. This is, let's call this 10, let's call this 15, 1250. 1250. Let's call this 15. Here, $10. I don't have anything. You said this is -2 and -5. If I am to plot your response to changes in price, this is a $2.50 increment with each movement, you can see that it's not a perfectly linear response. Right, so we've got some non-linearity. It looks like indeed you are price sensitive, that as the price goes up, you like the alternative less, but going from $10 to $12.50, that slope is not as steep as going from $12.50 to $15, which would suggest that if I was already charging 10 and I raised the price to 12, Sebastian's going to be less happy and might switch if there's another alternative that makes him happier. He's a little less happy, but clearly he's a lot less happy when I go from $12.50 to $15, and so I should be more concerned about changing price at the high end for customers if everybody's like Sebastian than changing price at the low end. So knowing something about what the price sensitivity looks like is important. And I'm also going to point out that just to keep in mind that sometimes sensitivity to things that could be linear, like price, might be non-linear in terms of how people make those evaluations. And that's going to be important later as we start to think about how to model some of this data. So I'm just going to put this aside. Thank you very much for helping me out with that. And then, let's say I've got table service now. If instead of counter service it was table service, how much would you like this alternative? Sebastian?
If it was table service?
Yeah, do you like it more or do you like it less?
Less.
Okay, so, and by how much?
Maybe
2 points. Okay, so you really dislike table service relative to counter service.
10 minutes.
Okay. And then 10 minutes away relative to 5 minutes away, now you gotta walk a little bit.
-5.
-5.
-5 and -7.
-7. Okay, so this is really gonna change your ratings. Okay, so I'm gonna point something out. So how did I get these ratings? This is where I want to go. I want to have a model like this. If I have a model like this for Sebastian, I know what his rating is for a barbecue restaurant, $10, counter service 5 minutes away, and I know how much that changes if we swap out the attribute levels from barbecue to Mexican or Thai, we swap out the attribute levels from $10 to $12.50 or $15, from counter service to table service, from 5 minutes to 10 minutes or 15 minutes, which means that I could now plug in, Evan and I could now plug in any possible configuration for a restaurant that we're offering and be able to come up with an estimate about what Sebastian would rate that restaurant, because we know something about what I'm going to refer to as his preference policy. So inside his head is, this is how I rate these. Now, the way in which I asked these things was individual. I did it attribute by attribute. And then we can put these together to get an estimate about what Sebastian would think overall for a restaurant. So if I wanted to say, well, what will he think of a Mexican restaurant? It's $10 with counter service 5 minutes away. I just take this 8, I add 1 to it, my estimate would be a 9, and so I can get that estimate for him. But and this method is not impossible to use. There are many researchers that use a method like this, but we're going to refer to this method as a compositional method. I'm going to ask about individual attributes, and then we're going to put them together. And this is okay, but it has a couple of drawbacks. First of all, this is not the way we or the way consumers generally evaluate things in the real world. In the marketplace, we look at entire alternatives, we get an overall gestalt evaluation for those things, and we rate them in that way. If I ask people about individual attributes, I say, focus on this attribute right now, and really think about this. And what happens is they tend to be then rated as more important than they otherwise would be, because I'm saying, take a look at this, and how important. So if I were to be looking at an automobile and ask you, like, how important is it to you that the radio controls are over here on the steering wheel versus being over here on the dashboard? Maybe if you were to be driving the car, you wouldn't have thought of that at all. It just is where it is, or it's a tiny nuisance and it doesn't really influence my evaluation at all. But if I ask you about it directly, you might say, oh yeah, I guess that is something, because I focused your attention on it. And so by using a compositional method like this, we may not get results that represent what goes on in reality. In fact, in reality, we're often forced to make trade-offs. So here, this alternative is expensive, but it is the kind of food that I want, and so I'm willing to trade off the high price to have the cuisine that I want. And so if we think about alternatives being evaluated in their entirety, it allows us to evaluate the trade-offs that consumers have to make in order to get one attribute to trade off against another attribute. And in fact, there are instances where using a method like this. Did you have a question, Diego, or you're just stretching?
No, I have a comment, but...
Okay, so I'm going to come back to it. So that if we ask people to evaluate alternatives in their entirety, there are instances in which we can learn about how much they evaluate attributes even when they don't know the value of the attribute. And I'm going to give you a mental model to help you think about that. If you've ever been to a restaurant and said, this is delicious, what's in it? This is delicious, what's in it? Which means you're able to evaluate that I like the thing in its entirety, but you don't know what it is that's driving your preferences. And so I could build versions of products that have certain attributes in them. So maybe we're talking about food, and the food has got either thyme or basil or oregano. So those are 3 different flavors that might be in the food. And you might say, I really like it, and you might not know, some people don't know the difference between what does basil taste like, what does thyme taste like, what does oregano. I don't know what those things taste like, the difference, but I do know what I like, and I like this. And so if all the instances where thyme was present, you gave a higher rating, and all the instances where thyme was not present, you gave a lower rating, then we can infer that the difference in those ratings is due to the presence of thyme. And so we can ask people about entire alternatives, and then we can go back to the lab, and we can decompose the evaluations of those alternatives to get an estimate of what the value is on attribute levels that they might not even be aware of. Diego, you had a question?
No, I just have a comment on this, because I shared with the team recently that in my business unit, we just launched a new brand of frozen food for dogs. And all the process all the work that we had to do prior to launching, you know, the product and the brand and the reasons to believe is like very related to this. So for instance, like the first thing we did was some competitive and secondary research on understanding or listing a huge number of attributes that are important for this type of customer in this segment. And then we run what we call a MaxDiff study. When you interview customers and then you add like priorities to this massive list of attributes. And then for the top 2 segments of priorities, then we run a conjoint analysis where we have more customers giving us data on trade-offs and willingness to pay based on all those prioritized list of attributes. And based on that research is how we determine what are the key attributes that are important for our customers that we should launch with, and what are the anchor or the reasons to believe for the brand and the product, the ones that we put on every single ad and campaign out there. So very similar to what you're describing there.
It's fabulous. I'm glad that you shared. This is one of the reasons why I like to teach in the EMBA program is that there are people that say, I've done these exact things. Now some people say, my business did something a little bit different. The method of conjoint analysis that we're going to do, because there are many methods by which we can do conjoint analysis, we're going to do a method so that everybody gets a rich understanding. I will show you that there are a variety of different methods that are along the way. I'd love to hear more, and I also want you to tell me how successful everything was as a result of this.
I mean, we launched 2 weeks ago, so we're still.
Oh, so we'll be able to see. So when we come back a month from now, you'll be able to tell us how.
But it's been very successful so far.
That's fantastic. Did you want to add something, Brian?
Yeah, I just want to mention, like Diego, I've employed conjoint analysis on 2 occasions at 2 prior employers. And it's very useful in terms of just in a more industrial setting to figure out which combinations or which offerings, price, quality, services that our customers value. And then we use that to segment the markets and then also drive our strategy in terms of what investments we're going to make.
So we will act. So today, let me just point out. Both of you said something about segmentation. I want to point out for everybody else. Today we are going to make some assumptions early on that we've already segmented the market, and the folks that we are looking at are already part of an individual segment. Tomorrow we're going to talk more about segmentations and methods for doing it, and I will come back to the data that we've looked at here and show you a little bit about how we can even use that information, the information that we get from today, in order to actually find potential differences segments in the market. So for today, let's just imagine that we're looking at one segment. We're going to target one group of consumers, assume it's people like us who might go to restaurants in this area, and then tomorrow we'll get into the segmentation aspect of it, doing some more cool analysis. Okay, so that means that I don't have to share this slide, which is my. Are you skeptical that this is even any good? Usually I have to tell full-time MBA students, look at all the different companies, examples I've got, companies that use conjoint analysis, but you've got your own colleagues here telling you that this is something that's not. Overall, what are the stages of conjoint analysis? We start off by identifying the attributes and the levels that we're going to be looking at, because we can't study every possible attribute that might change in a product. We have to choose the ones that are important to us, and the ones that are important to us are probably from some other analysis. I think Diego said that you did some qualitative work.
The max diff.
And you did max diff, so this is another form of analysis that you can do to find out which of the attributes that are likely, we're not absolutely sure, but likely to be important to consumers, and then we'll find out about the relative importance of those and the levels later on through this analysis. And typically, there are a variety of different methods of doing conjoint analysis, but typically we're talking about looking at 4 to 7 different attributes, and then within each attribute, 3, 4, 5, 6 different levels of the attributes that are in there. So you can see how as we increase the number of attributes, and as we increase the number of levels of each attribute, then that will vastly increase the attribute space that we have to do an analysis for. And that means that we're vastly increasing the space by which we're going to have to ask consumers about or participants, study participants about their preferences. And there's a trade-off that we have to make as researchers. And that's that I want the quality of the data to be quite good, but I also want the quantity of data to be enough so that I can make the claims that I need to make from the analysis that I do. And the problem is particularly when we've got humans that are participating, if I ask you lots and lots of questions, at some point you're going to get tired. And I will get consumers who will say, they'll just start saying 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5 all the way down the line, when in fact they really do have preferences, but they don't want to answer the information that I give. So I'm gonna have to balance that and trade it off. Sri?
How is this different from linear regression or a correlation or that?
You're gonna see that, so conjoint analysis is a method of understanding consumers that employs a variety of different analysis techniques. We're going to use ordinary least squares regression as the way to understand what levels or what the part words are that people place on each one of the levels of attributes. There are other methods that might use slightly different models. I'll show you just a little taste of that. We might use a logistic model if we were giving people choices. We might use a MONONOVA. So there's slightly different models that we might use. And you'll see in a minute, we're going to get to, so maybe not in a minute, but in 10 minutes. So first I've identified the attributes and the levels. Does someone have a question?
Yes, sir. I mean, does this allow for modeling with, like your choices were obviously 3 restaurants. What about like the choice of non-restaurant? Like other, you know, I mean, you're taking assumptions, I guess. Does the modeling still allow that?
So the assumption that there is, like, I wouldn't go to any of the restaurants.
Correct.
Yeah, really good question, Richard. So in the approach that we're going to take now, we're going to make an assumption that if I have 2 restaurants and a person values one more than the other, I'm going to assume that they're going to choose the one that they like the best. There are other methods of using conjoint analysis, which is called a choice-based conjoint analysis, that allow me to include the possibility that a person would choose none of the options that are available. And then when I go to estimate it, I can find out what the minimum cutoffs are. We're not going to do that here, but there are methods by which we can do this using slightly different, a little bit more sophisticated, and I wanted to make sure that we get everybody on the same page here. But really good question.
So hypothetically, you probably wouldn't do it this way in the real world. Then you would always have that alternative option.
You might, like,
or was there benefits to doing both? Or
This is a little bit simpler to do it this way. So if you were quick, unlimited budget, maybe we would approach it this way. But there are others. In general, we might do things a little bit more. I would prefer the choice-based methods. Like, a lot of people have not had. I don't know in your stats class if you did logistic regression or not, and so
Yes.
okay. So well, anyway, we're working with this.
sorry, I appreciate it. Yes.
No, this is good. This is an excellent question. And I like this question because I am going to talk about one method. It will help us build our skills. Be aware that there are other methods in the marketplace. Tomorrow, when we look at segmentation, I'm going to dive into one method. Give you a taste of another method, knowing that there's 15 other possible methods. We're going to get a taste of each. Nanda?
So I have a quick question. Taking that as an example, like you gave a number to like sit down or counter service. Let's say it also varies by age group. Let's use an example, like maybe older folks want a table service versus younger folks maybe go to the counter. Can you combine these two? Like,
Absolutely.
like how does that work? Like it becomes its own attribute?
Let's after we run our analysis, let's come back to that. You're absolutely right that in asking our consumers to give us the ratings, or I shouldn't say consumers, when asking study participants who should be consumers who are representative of the population. So we will take a sample from the population to participate. We can also ask them information about other segmentation variables. So how often they go out to eat, or what their age is, or what their income is. And then I can look at the results and see, do they differ depending on income? Do they differ depending upon age? Do they differ depending upon how often they go out to eat? And if in fact that they do, then I might recognize that there's actually 2 segments in terms of their preferences. So maybe people who are younger, for whatever reason, like Mexican and barbecue more. Maybe people who are older tend to like Thai food more. And so then I would recognize that there are different segments in the market. And then maybe I would choose only some of those segments, one or more of them to go after, depending on what I see as the possible profit. Does that answer your question, Nanda?
Yes. That's for segmentation, but my question is, you came up with 4 attributes.
Yeah.
Can you combine another like attribute of sit down versus counter plus age as a new attribute?
But age of what? Age of the person?
Age of the customer.
So so the customer is not an attribute of the product.
Age is.
The age of the customer does not describe the product, but it describes the individual. So what you want to know is, does that individual's rating of counter versus table service differ depending upon what their age is? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Right, okay, and so then what I can do is I can run the analysis, and then I can look to see within people who are in my set, is there a difference in the way in which they rate counter versus table service depending upon the age? And if there is, then maybe I don't want to just use the average rating of counter service to get my estimate of how much they value it. I might take that apart and say, well, young people could care less, and maybe in fact like the counter service better. Older people might want the table service. And so if I know something about who my target audience is, if they tend to be older people, then that means I want to go in this direction. If I know they tend to be younger people, I go in that direction. And if I say maybe there's an opportunity for both, now I got to figure out how am I going to provide one product for one and one product for another. Maybe I create two versions of the product. I don't know how I do it in a single restaurant, but maybe I'll launch two restaurants that are near one another in order to get them from the same market, but offer different features and benefits. Is that
Yeah,
answer your
I
question?
think that clarifies.
Alright, cool. Alright, so let's do this. Okay, so then, after I create the profiles, I'll design the study, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that, and I'm going to choose the data collection method, then I collect the data, then I do my analysis, and then from there I get insight. So the conjoint analysis is a series of stages. To Sri's point, it includes in the analysis point 6, that's the part where I'm going to employ the ordinary least squares regression in this case, or maybe I would use a logistic regression or Mononova. But conjoint analysis involves this entire process of identifying the attributes and creating the profiles.
So is there a method in identifying the attributes? Now, this is a restaurant, it's pretty easy for us to say these are the attributes that may affect the pricing or whatever, right? But typically, for any product,
Yeah.
Is there a method, a scientific method or anything that will help you, this is what you follow to identify all the attributes?
So there are a variety of methods that I can use as I try to understand what's important to consumers and what's important to the business. So in this case where Evan and I just used managerial gut feel based on what we knew, and we also knew that these were still big questions that we had to make investments in, so they were important to us as a business. I didn't include cleanliness of the bathroom and how much money I'm going to spend on it. That could be slightly important, maybe I left it out, but maybe that's not something I'm going to invest money in. So subjectively, we've decided that's not important. Diego talked about when I really know very, very little about what's important to consumers, I might use some sort of qualitative methods up front. So I'll bring people into focus groups and I'll talk to them about the kinds of problems that they're trying to solve and what are the attributes that might be important to them. I might suggest some attributes that I have and try and get some feedback on them as I try to boil down what are the things that I'm going to look at. But I also want to look at things that I might be able to make some decision about. Right? So there's not a huge amount of value in asking people whether they want red or blue, if in fact I'm not going to be making a big decision about red or blue. That's going to cost me in terms of the quality of the data because I'm asking about this alternative, when in fact it might not make a difference. So there's qualitative methods from there. I might run some kind of survey. Diego talked about this max dip method, which is just a way to understand what's, in general, what attributes tend to be more important or less important to consumers. So there are a variety of other methods, and in a market research class we spend a little bit more time on. Ivan. Vinod, I'm sorry. It's Indra and Vinod.
Yes. My question is, what if there is no historical data? Like, you are launching a product,
Yeah.
and then there are other competitors who are also trying to launch it, but there is no historical data, and how do you want to price it right?
Right, so here we have no, Evan and I, in fact, Evan's even left, that's how we I got no data. So we don't have any data. We're gonna try and collect that data on our own, right? And because it's important to us. So there are plenty of times.
My question is if the product is new, so the customers have not seen it.
Yeah.
So even if you try to collect it, you may not be able to collect it because there is no you're launching it new, brand new,
I mean, couldn't you use
Right.
like if it's a
Yeah, so it's like a
substitute,
new
couldn't
brand.
you use like what it's substituted in your analysis?
Yeah, or, I mean, certainly I can ask people about any new products to the world, some new concept. I could explain what it is, I could show them versions of what that product is like. I don't have any information about, from prior instances, but for any physical product, I can still make decisions about the size, and if it's an electronics, maybe something about the battery life, and some of the features and the benefits that I had. I still have trade-offs and choices that consumers might decide whether they like it more or like it less, and what it is that they're willing to pay for it. And at this stage in the process, I can at least gather some information about the direction I might want to go. And that doesn't say for sure when I launch it into the market, it's going to reflect exactly what happened in my study. And so if it's never been launched into the market before, I might run other kinds of test markets, pre-test markets, or other sorts of studies to get an understanding about what the uptake is going to be.
Like I was going to look at the example of when iPhone was launched first time. So they came up with like a high price versus the other phones like BlackBerry or whatever, which were already there. But then like iPhone was successful, but what if it had a failure, right? So it would have caused repercussions for the
Yeah, but it would not be impossible for the folks at Apple at the time to have even shown people, because they would maybe have built prototypes. Here are 24 different prototypes that we built where we've adjusted the size of the screen, and we've adjusted how sensitive it is, we've adjusted some things about how much the battery life is, we've adjusted some things on the price. We could ask people to evaluate those things. And then once they've evaluated them, we've got their evaluations, we've got an array of adjustments that we've made. We can regress their evaluations on the array of adjustments. We can still get an estimate like what's more important than the screen size or the battery life, which is a really important trade-off because you can fit a larger battery in, but you've got to have a larger screen size. And so the one that's more important than it might be the one that I might lean more toward or against. And I can do all of this without the product already existing in the marketplace. And that might be valuable to me at that point. That doesn't mean for sure it's going to be successful or not. There's a variety of other factors. And there are other tests that I can do if it's an important and big investment for the company. Then maybe I would do more testing on it to learn it. If it's not a big investment, maybe roll the dice, see what happens, and make a difference. We'll see. Okay, so let me move forward on this and keeping track of time. So after I have got my attributes and my levels, I'm going to create all of the possible profiles. And if I've got a 3 by 3 by 3 by 2 design, right? 3 attribute levels of cuisine, 3 of price, 3 of distance, and 2 of service, how many possible combinations are there? You multiply 3 by 3 by 3 by 2, and you come up with 54 possible combinations. Do you want to answer, would any consumer, would anybody want to answer, what do you think of 54 possible combinations?
No.
It's a lot. It is a lot, right? So if it's really important to me that I'm able to get estimates of all of the possible interactions, and the interactions could be important. Let me give you an example where an interaction is important. I like ice cream sundaes. If you were to ask me what my favorite flavor of ice cream is from chocolate vanilla or mint chocolate chip, I would tell you mint chocolate chip. If you were to ask me what my favorite topping is from hot fudge, caramel, and strawberry sauce, I would say strawberry sauce is my favorite. But if you put strawberry sauce on top of mint ice cream, it's terrible. And so that is an interaction. There's a main effect for the flavor of mint is better than any of the other flavors. There's a main effect for the flavor of strawberry is better than any of the other toppings. But if you put the two together, that's an interaction that actually decreases my evaluation. And so if it's really important to me to capture those interactions, then I'm going to have to ask more questions of the respondents to be able to get enough data to be able to look at those interactions. If, as a manager, Evan and I think, well, the main effects are likely, and most of the time the main effects really do capture most of the information, and we're okay rolling the dice on some of these interactions, then we can use a design that's easier for consumers to respond to. And so rather than asking what we refer to as a full factorial, that means all of the possible combinations, asking people to rate all 54 combinations, we can use a design of experiment approach to reduce the set of alternatives that people have to respond to into what we refer to as a fractional factorial design. And a fractional factorial design just means a limited set of alternatives that we're going to ask about. But we have to specially be thoughtful about how we're going to select them so that we can still see the main effects. So I'm going to show you a little bit about why I'm choosing this kind of a design. And then after that, we'll take a break and then we'll come back and we'll do the analysis. I just sort of heads up for sort of where we're going on this. So let me show you what I mean about this fractional factorial design. I'll give an example of why I want to do this. So here in my spreadsheet, which you can download if you want to play along for today, by the way, is a spreadsheet called EMEA Contour Data 2025. And I'm going to go out here. I've got a tab on a note about fractional factorial designs. Let me just sort of show you what's going on here. Sort of show you the idea. Okay. So let's imagine over here, just to sort of follow along. This, inside my head, by the way, maybe I should show you the brain picture so you know what's going on. Inside my head is my preference policy. Here is how I rate things. So let me tell you about what goes on inside my head. My preference rule. The worst possible thing that you could offer to me out of this array is something that costs $15, that's 15 minutes away. Anything that costs $15, any restaurant, $15 and 15 minutes away, gets a 1. Why? Because I'm price sensitive and I'm distance sensitive. If you make it closer by 5 minutes, so instead of 15 minutes away, it's 10 minutes away, it increases my rating by 3. That's how I evaluate things. If you make it 5 minutes away, that increases my rating compared to 15 minutes away by 6. So my rating goes up as it gets closer. If you lower the price from $15 to $12.50, my rating goes up by 1 point. And if you lower the price from $15 down to $10, my rating goes up to 2 points. I don't care about the cuisine at all. Indifference doesn't change my rating at all. I don't care about the kind of service at all. I'm indifferent. I don't change my rating at all. Does everybody see that that is my preference policy? It is entirely based on the price, where higher prices are worse than lower prices, and entirely based on the distances, where higher distances are worse than lower distances. And so if you were to ask me, in a theoretical world, what my preference is for all of the possible alternatives, here is my ratings for each of these, right? And you can see here is an example. This one right here is $15, 15 minutes away. I give that a 1. Let's find another one that's $15, 15 minutes away. I give that a 1. So all of the ones that are really expensive and really far away, I give low ratings to. And as the price comes down or the distance comes down, my rating increases. And so on this, you can see that my ratings have nothing to do with the kind of food, whether it be Mexican, Thai, or barbecue, and nothing to do with the the service, counter service or table service. And now I say, as the researcher, if you were to ask me all of these things, what would I tell you? Even though that's in my head, I might start to get tired. And I might start to just say, it's a 5, it's a 4, it's a 9, and give you noise, nonsense. Or I might look at 54 and say, no way am I doing that, and just start hammering 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, or 7, 7, 7, 7, all the way down the line, and so not reveal to you what my true preferences are. And so instead you say, okay, let's not ask Andy what all of his preferences are. Let's ask a limited set. Maybe if we make it easier for him, he'll be more likely to give those true responses. And indeed, that is the case. If you only ask me about a few, I'm more likely to tell you the truth. So let's say that instead of 54, you only ask me about 18 alternatives. So it makes sense that you would do that. You have to be thoughtful about which 18 alternatives you ask me about. Let's imagine that if you just randomly selected them, by dumb chance alone, every one that you selected was $15. And then I answered what I thought about them. If you did not ask me about alternatives that were less expensive, if you did not ask me about alternatives that weren't as far away, then you would not have collected the data to be able to determine what my valuation of more and less expensive things are. So by just randomly selecting, you take the risk that you might not necessarily collect the right data to be able to look at the differences. And furthermore, it gets even a little bit more complicated than that. It can be worse. So let's imagine that for just whatever reason, I had asked, so here I've asked about these alternatives, about every third or so. Let's say that I had randomly selected them. You can see that the ones that are 15 minutes away, here they are, the ones that are 15. All I did was I said, here's the same one. This is barbecue, $15, counter service, 15 minutes away. And here it is, barbecue, counter service. You asked me, barbecue, counter service, 15 minutes away. I told you the truth, barbecue, 15, counter service, 15 minutes away, and I gave you a 1. Here's all the ones that are 15 minutes away up here, then all the ones that are 10 minutes away, then all the ones that are 5 minutes away. And if you take the average of those, you can see, just like we would expect, the ones that are closer, I rate more highly. The ones that are farther, I rate at a lower value. So that's consistent with what my preference policy is. But because I randomly selected these, you can see also that all the ones that you asked me about that were 15 minutes away were also barbecue restaurants, by dumb luck. And all the ones that were 10 minutes away were also Thai restaurants. And all the ones that were 5 minutes away were also Mexican restaurants. So it would also appear that perhaps I really like Mexican restaurants, and I kind of like Thai restaurants, and I don't like barbecue restaurants at all. When in fact, I could care less what the cuisine is. And yet this data might suggest that. And the problem is that because the variables that you asked me about are correlated, distance is correlated with cuisine. Whenever you ask me about 15 minutes away, you also ask me about barbecue. We cannot tease apart whether my ratings are due to the cuisine or due to the distance. And so if we want to ask a limited number of alternatives from a full factorial design, we need to use a specially designed fractional factorial design that is designed in such a way that the independent variables are not highly correlated, so that when we ask Sri to help us with the ordinary least squares regression, that we're able to get estimates for each one of the attributes independently. And we'll be able to show where did the variance come from associated with my ratings. Does it come from the distance or does it come from the cuisine? And so I can use another model. So this is a model that does use a fractional factorial design, right? And what you can see here, and this is like in the model that we're going to use, here's all my barbecues. And you can see across barbecues I've got different prices, and across barbecues I've got different kinds of service, and across barbecues I've got different kinds of distances. So there's a very low correlation, if any correlation at all, between these. And so here's my ratings. And then if I sort these ratings by distance, you can see indeed it shows the difference in my preferences by distance. But if I sort these same ratings again by cuisine, you can see that the average rating is the same, which would suggest that there's no effect of cuisine and only the effect of the distance. And so the big takeaway from all of this is when we use a conjoint analysis which has a full factorial model which has many, many alternatives, we have a goal of reducing the number of alternatives that we might ask our participants to respond to. We can't just randomly select what those alternatives are. Instead, we want to use a purposeful fractional factorial design that ensures that the independent variables are not highly correlated so that we can tease apart the effects of each one of the attributes. This demonstrates that that's important. In the homework assignment that you'll have to work on in your teams, I'm just going to give you what those fractional factorial designs are. So for any design that you can come up with, it will tell you which are the alternatives you should ask about to ensure that you don't have correlated independent variables so that you'll be able to run your analysis. Okay, so I'm going to pause there since it's a good time for a break. If my understanding is you guys usually take a break of how many minutes, Brandon? 10 to 15, somebody will say 20 minutes. At 25 until 10 o'clock, I will start talking again, and it gets really geeky cool because we're going to start doing some analysis. So come and see. Come back in 25 hours.
No, they gave yesterday.
No, ours are, you want to have. I'm not really, I was thinking. Wild.
Oh,
Find something still 100% in your
I'm 100% away.
We're doing general.
You're not gonna try to job search for a while. Just run
I'm searching everywhere.
Okay. Yeah, it's that's the good way. I mean, if we have it already rolling, might as well.
It's rolling. I don't know where it's going.
Yeah. Do you have any companies that are looking into adopting it, or clients that you had conversations with and the sentiment is right?
So it's
Actually,
Yeah, it's just a matter of whether it is in a household gain structure. So it's just a matter of when household gain structure.
is slowly coming up. One kind of doing
So I was like, got off the phone and called the pod.
I think in the US, it's like a state.
I mean, I
That's good. And it's just you and another person. There's two of you right now. What do you got?
We have almost 8.
Oh, that's big already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did not have to do any very when it comes to or many times.
Yeah, but those ones are not.
So full time we are and is effectively
Yeah, you need to.
He's just working 16 hours a day.
That's all. 16 hours a day. Wow. That's more than full time. That's 2 jobs.
Yeah, he actually has two.
Good.
He has 2 companies, but
Oh.
Correct. Yeah. And to be honest, my favorite.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm curious to see.
he's complaining that you screwed up my retirement.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how that progresses over time.
Let's see.
That's how like.
It's positive.
Yeah, that's good.
So we're getting the backing of Aviva Schneider.
Now,
It's a big.
Wait, so this is like.
They're connecting us with their distribution network. So
40 years, 70 years.
Schneider distribution
Roots is more of an agrarian. We thought of animals, very different.
So it's every activity in the manufacturing facility is also the test. So we are looking at, getting some of this work off the test. And it's, the data platforms are still built, but the way they interact with the tablet or these technologies have not been revamped in the, so we are just trying to change that.
Yeah, I mean, right now, like I have all the research.
They need some love.
So that is just mostly manufacturing facility. Is it also like
Manufacturing, construction, civil,
oil and gas as well?
obviously,
That was the name of the project.
Yeah, that's a broad industry, you know, because manufacturing is
huge. It's huge.
Right, so
It depends on, what is going to end up sticking.
correct,
Yeah,
so of
yeah.
course.
yeah, but as soon as it gets it gains traction.
The mastiff first. The mastiff first.
Yeah, and then also
Yeah, because, we don't wanna run a clinic on
Global Lab or even NMR in line to just do measurements.
based on secondary research, customers, and of course, like.
We broke ground, so we drained the pond and we're filling that pond right now, so about a couple weeks. Then we're gonna pause for a couple of months, just for if we can. We'll start foundation work probably in October or November.
In across, in this case, across different dimensions, like
We
formulation.
wanna be up and running, fully commissioned, or at least we wanna have sellable product by January 1st.
That's the master is what data said, but then you rank the importance, like the most important reason for and ability.
No, so all, yes, so, we have already kind of our second lithium identified. The NMR little mobile lab, we're sticking one on their site next month, building it right now. That's in Marcellus in Pennsylvania, West Virginia.
So that is.
We're tinkering the Bakken.
Yeah, so there's a formulation.
Saskatchewan area, for lithium.
But also like formulation is
Our nickel project,
probably
probably a year and a half will be permitted. But it's kind of most of the contractual terms of this one.
Yeah, what you have and what
Nitty
you
gritty
don't have.
details, but for the most part, there's a principal acquisition there.
Source, so
Kind of
made
it's
with
like buying
non-GMO
that.
ingredients, veterinarian formulated, free protein. But like we had like probably close to 100 attributes of
Cash flows
were five dimensions, and that's where the massive was like filter out.
And we have first party with this exploration company that.
Yeah.
We'll have first purchase project. So they turned into a real exploration company.
Yeah, absolutely. And totally respect your company.
We're constantly.
Probably I would say not.
Maybe there's a way to
How do you, with big companies,
potentially use more official channels to see
we're gonna pick that up.
like a case with a contract disguise or something.
Yeah,
And then you go back and.
yeah.
We could be able to use some money.
The really the goal is,
I'll ask
we
my.
wanna have an engineering and build team that are
Make
constantly.
me smart.
Yeah.
Have that in
Thanks a lot.
So they need to, so there always needs to be something in
You
like
wanna
a greenfield or brownfield type build. Acquisitions will be as they present themselves and kind of more strategic and opportunistic. They gotta be, for now, for the short term, it's gotta be low cash, like we only paid $3 million for the copper mine.
Because you guys want the products to generate your own engineering.
Yeah, currently using still that Series A. But we closed our Series A, so we've got cash in the bank, but that's for the top co. This is very complex, like, I think we already have 6 companies, or 5 or 6, that are, just because you want to buffer yourself. There's also buffering around so they don't get give them some growth opportunities like a copper, there's the lithium, copper below that, and there's the parent on top, so you give exposure to investors to copy investments. But we're very careful on the top row. That's where we should start to say those on the priority cards page right now.
For 70 pages of color copies. Legally compound. So that would be the same. Yeah. Well, those two companies are basically corporate group. Okay, so there's just 2 separate existing entities founded separately. Do you do something, do you want them to be connected or do you want them to be independent operating? That's really a tax like accounting question because, you don't want to get, it's really more of a tax accounting setting up.
I expect Gemini to do that thing on Chrome just to.
It's built on Chrome.
Yeah.
The complexity of
Exactly. So like, why were you getting like?
Exactly.
It is, yeah.
Maybe if you like just kind of sketch out like who these companies are, like which companies are, who the shareholders are. Then I can kind of like, use it easier to draw it like with your entities like on a map, like a chart, you can see like who's in, where the money is.
No, my.
This one's a
Wait. No. And then you can see if there's like the other. And then we call them bangers, right? And there's part of our business is also like how to react to like they're like like haphazardly, like I was telling Chris it's actually part of the reason. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, how many walks per minute?
tail wags per minute.
Yeah.
That's a hilarious statistic.
Yeah, and then you, I mean, for the same dog, right?
You know what you need to do? On the website, you need to put a
I'm not
WPA
kidding.
No, seriously, on the website, you need to put a wags per minute rating for each
Yeah.
food.
We have to have a chew meter for dogs. Yeah. Like,
I love it,
this
man.
is like what your chew meter are, your dog falls. And this store is like very high in the chew meter bar.
I only buy 120 wag per minute food or above.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm a food snob.
Yeah, so we have our product testers, and then you use the same doggies on different.
That's cool.
So that's how you standardize the reaction from the same dogs. Like, it's actually
That's fascinating.
it is. And then you see the videos and stuff.
How they look.
Yeah, that's why like you use the same dog, like how they react on food.
What's the new?
The other thing with our thesis is the only way
Name from the research.
a mining company
They keep
That's
on
great.
using
can survive all that price volatility,
So what's the price point?
and especially manipulation of that price, especially by China.
the real
Which they do routinely every 6 months to a year, depending on
That's how it goes.
oversupply, oversaturate the market to keep people out.
So you're talking about like $3 a day.
3 to 4 years. You've got to have a price floor. I mean, for us, you have a price floor, you probably can't go high, you can't give all the risk to the risk. We are negotiating and have a lot of interest in fixed cost pricing.
My issue.
This is a big deal.
I They got a fixed cost.
Well, like in general, or
In general,
so Morgan Stanley is toward the journey. So right now we have not really looked at types of Gen AI, whatever. Right now they're just throwing like they have a chalkboard. Where the biggest challenge for Morgan Stanley is sort of big, and they have information right out. So like if there's they don't have a very simple knowledge base or something like that where you know, like even if you're trying to put together like an AI solution that information is sitting on the spread consolidated, and then also things like just like data pipelines, so they don't even put it in one place. So they need to open each other. Like a Gen AI solution. So right now, they just go what is your environment rather than I know everything in silos, so this guy's the guys on the other unit inside into the side, and eventually when get all that information.
I really thought it was already going to be done. I was like, I know it's coming. I knew it was coming.
It's okay, I need to get over it. It's helping me to.
You did here. I mean, so you got that going on.
Let's throw Lance off too. I'm actually looking out for Lance. He's like, he's kind of funny.
Rich is gonna be curled up in his bathroom shower, like, rocking back.
It's only the second time it's happened in the whole year. Yeah, one time it was Megan. Megan got up. Like, literally 30 seconds.
But it's not an enterprise-wide solution.
Is that your vice president?
But then the guys in the
Let's get back to work. I've turned down the lights, not for napping, but so that the screen is a little bit easier to see. That's helpful. So if you want, you can open up the spreadsheet and play along with me. This project is called EMBA Conjoint Data 8-2025. I'm on the tab that's called Preference Data here, and the only difference between my spreadsheet and yours is that I have found our friend Sebastian's ratings from deep into the set of preferences and moved them to the front here so that we can work on him since we've already talked about his ratings earlier. So we'll take another look at it. So here's what I'm going to just sort of notice a few things. When I look at Sebastian's ratings, I see sometimes they are higher and sometimes they are lower. So his ratings do have variance in them. And what I want to do is I want to explain that variance. Why is it that sometimes his ratings are higher and sometimes those ratings are lower? And I assume that I can explain the variance in his ratings, which will be the dependent variable, with the information that is in our independent variables. I assume that the ratings that he gives us changes as a result of the presence or absence of the levels that are present and absent in each one of the attributes. And so what I have is my cuisine rated barbecue Thai or Mexican. I've got the prices that he rated $15, $12, $50, $10. There was counter service and table service, and then there's a variety of distances. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just use ordinary least squares regression for this. And I'm going to say data and data analysis, and then I'm going to choose regression. So I'm using Excel. If you use another tool, that's fine, but I'll use just the Excel's regression tool here. And I'm going to say OK. And so then the dependent variable is the y range. So that's the y value and that's Sebastian's ratings. And then the independent variables, sometimes referred to as the variant, is the set of attributes that he rated. And so that's the X range, which is the cuisine, the price, the service, and the distance, because I expect that his ratings will change dependent on those things. And then I'm going to click labels because I've got the labels in here, and so I want to know, is it cuisine, is it price, is it service? And then I'm ready to run this regression so that I can understand why is it that Sebastian's ratings are sometimes higher and sometimes lower. Does that make sense? Everybody okay with this? So you ready for me to, Evan, how are we doing? Are we're gonna make big money here? Sure. So I'm say this, everybody okay with this?
Would you show this like one more time, 30 seconds, please?
So I'm just going to run the regression. So I'm saying data analysis, regression. Click on regression. I'm saying okay. My dependent variable, that's the variable that changes as a result of changes in something else. That's Sebastian's ratings. And then the independent variable is, the independent variables are all of the different attributes and levels of the attributes. So that's all the stuff in blue. And then I'm clicking on labels here because I want it to tell me which attribute level is which. Now I'm ready to say, okay. Everybody okay with this? Why is he just standing there drinking coffee?
I don't think it's not gonna work.
I don't think it's gonna work, says Coco, right? Why is it not gonna work?
Because you need to translate your text into numeric value.
Absolutely, right? So we can't just run this regression that easily because these are categorical variables, aren't they, right? So we've got cuisine, service are categorical variables. So if I say, okay, it's going to tell me input range contains non-numeric data, and so I'm not able to run this yet. So there's another step that we have to do before we do this. So let's cancel this. We'll come back to you, regression, good friend of ours. So what do I need to do? I need to do what?
Make a dummy there.
Okay, I need to make dummy variables. You guys remember dummy variables from your stats test? So I'm going to create dummy variables for to represent this set of independent variables. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make some space, and just so that it's easier to tell it apart, I'm going to change the background color of this. We'll make this a light gray. And I need some space. Actually, enough space. Gray. Okay, so for cuisine, let's think about the dummy variables for cuisine. I have 3 levels of cuisine. You can be Mexican, you can be Thai, or you can be barbecue restaurant. How many dummy variables do I need for those 3 levels of cuisine? 2. I need 2. I need 1 fewer than the number of levels that I have, because really what I'm doing is I'm going to create a variable that says, is it Mexican food or not? And another variable that is it Thai food or not? And if it is not Thai and it is not Mexican, then it has to be barbecue. And so I don't need another variable to represent the variance associated with barbecue because I already know the other 2. So I'm going to create a variable and I'm going to call it Thai. And another one I'm going to call Mexican. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a 1 wherever it's Thai. And for Mexican, I'm going to put a 1 wherever it's Mexican. And then I don't need a variable to represent barbecue because barbecue is going to be represented by the instances in which it is neither Thai nor Mexican. And then I'm just going to use this feature control F. And I'm going to say replace, and replace all the missing values with what? I'm going to replace all the missing values with zeros. And now I've created these dummy variables. Now, Do I need dummy variables to represent price? No, I don't need dummy variables to represent price. They are numerical. But I'm going to use them anyway, and I'm going to show you why I'm going to use them anyway. And it gets back to, oh, Sebastian's taking off, he doesn't even want to, he's afraid to see what we're going to do. Oh, you just put it back. Oh, you just plug it in your phone. Okay, so, pressure. Right, I know, you're doing great, you're doing great. So, if you recall, Sebastian's disutility for increasing price was not so steep, or not as steep, between $15 or between $10 and $12.50, and then got steeper between $12.50 and $15. And if we were to model this without adjusting for the fact that there's this kink in his preference function, the regression model makes an assumption of linearity. That means we would assume that with every increasing dollar, his preference goes down by the same amount. But what we know is that from looking visually at what his preference does, it actually has this curvilinear function. So I'll give you an example for folks. Some folks have this really easily, and other folks I'm gonna hammer this home. You have probably noticed that I stand up here and I drink a lot of coffee. And I will tell you that I like cream in my coffee, and here's how I like it. If there is no cream in my coffee, I am unhappy. If there's a little cream in my coffee, I'm quite happy. But if there's a lot of cream in my coffee, I am again unhappy. Which means that I have a curvilinear relationship. An ideal point, in fact, is what we would call a relationship with cream. And here is an example of when I was asked about this in the past. So here's the number of ounces of cream. If you have 0 ounces of cream, you can see that I'm unhappy. Choose 3s and 4s. If you have 1 ounce of cream, you can see that I'm quite happy. I rated those instances of drinking coffee of 5s, 6s, and 7s. And all the times I rated coffee that had 2 ounces of cream, I was again unhappy with 2s, 3s, and 4s. And so clearly there is a relationship between how happy I am and the amount of cream, but it is at an ideal point. And so if I were to run the regression here, data analysis, regression, and the Y range is my preference for the coffee, and the X range is the number of ounces of cream. And I say, okay, you can see when I look at this regression, what it tells me is at the intercept, that's with when there's no cream in it, I rate it as a 3.69 on average. And then you can see that, in fact, if you look at the R-squared of this regression, which explains the variance in the dependent variable from the independent variable, virtually nothing. And so you would take away from this, look at how much my preference changes with cream. What you would take away from this is that, in fact, I could care less about the amount of cream that's in my coffee. And another way we can look at that is the regression line is doing something like this, when in fact my actual preference looks like this. So what I want to do is I want to capture the fact that maybe there's this nonlinearity. Well, with Sebastian, I guess these are 6, 7, 59, but he had 10 and whatever the prices were, he had a line that looks like that. I want to capture this nonlinearity. So a way to capture this nonlinearity, short of transforming the variable, is I can use dummy codes as a way to do this. And so here is the exact, notice that these preferences are identical, but I'm just recoding rather than 1, 0, 1, and 2. I will code them as dummy codes if it's 1 ounces of cream or if it's 2 ounces of cream. So I'm just going to do the same thing, data analysis regression. The dependent variable, again, is my preferences. The independent variable is the dummy codes that represent the amount of cream. And I say, okay. And here you can see that the R squared is much higher, right? So I'm explaining the variance in my preference for coffee based on the amount of cream. And in fact, I get about 80% of that variance explained by the independent variables, which are the dummy variables. And what you can see is, if there's no cream in my coffee, my best estimate would be 2.667. If you add an ounce of cream, my estimate goes up by 3.16, so that means that the average estimate that you would estimate for me is 5.7 and change. And then if you add 2 ounces of cream, you can see that my preference only goes up a hair from 0 ounces of cream. So I go from 2.67 to 2.78, 2.9, something like that. And so I captured that variance with these dummy girls. Yes?
So basically, to interpret this, you're saying 1 ounce of cream increases your preference by 3 points, if you were to put points in perspective, right?
Correct, right. And so we can sort of think, I like this. Thank you very much for this question, because we're going to do this again. You can sort of think about this as, you gave me a cup of coffee, and there's no cream in it. How happy am I? My knees are hurt. I get down here, I'm like not very happy about it. I give it a 2.67. What is my part worth? The little bit of value in a cup of coffee, because there's a lot of things that goes into my happiness in a cup of coffee, but cream being one of them. The part worth for an ounce of cream is 3.16 bits of utility that I add, and so now my overall happiness is the sum of where I was when there was no cream plus the ounce of cream that you've added to it. And then what happens if you add 2 ounces of cream instead of 1, the amount of happiness that I go compared to 0 is just a hair higher, right?
Do you also interpret it as, you got your cup of coffee, it's 2.7, let's just say 2.7 units of happiness.
Yep.
And then you put 1 ounce of cream, so then it goes up by 0.5. So the incremental difference is the increase in your happiness?
If I put in 1 ounce of cream, it goes up by 3.167.
Oh, it's not incremental from 2.6 to...
It is, so I got 2.67 plus 3.16.
Oh, you got your little happiness. That's 5.7.
I'm at 5.7, yeah, right, and so does it make sense that I'm at 5.7 or so? It does, in fact, if we go back to this data here, it should be easy to see, equals the average of these values, 5.8. So it's actually done a pretty good job of estimating more or less where I am. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else any questions on this? Yeah.
When selecting the difference between the levels within an attribute, is there value to having equal differences? Like for example, 10, 12 and a half, 15 versus 10, 11, 15?
Good question. It is not imperative because we're just evaluating the utility that's associated with that change. But what is then important is that you understand what those part worths refer to. And the reason why is that later, in fact, I'm going to show you this, I call it this, later we're going to plot that price sensitivity, Sebastian's price sensitivity. And that means that we're going to increase the price by the number of the units that we measured, and then we're going to look at the changes relative to the base case, we're going to look at the changes in utility. And if the values are not equidistant and we plot them as though they are equidistant, that will change the slope of the line and we might blow it in terms of our interpretation. As long as you know that that's the case, then we can say a change of $1 from $1 to $2, for example, decreases Sebastian's preference by one bit of utility. And a change from $2 to $4, if that decreased it by 3 utils, I've got $3 change in 3 utils, then we would assume that that's a linear relationship. And so it's just a question of being able to interpret those.
Thank you.
Nice question. Yeah, good. Okay. Anybody else questions so far? Okay, so the takeaway from this is there are times where I have numeric values in my conjoint analysis where I could, and in many cases researchers will, treat them numerically as though there is a linear relationship between that value and the preference or utility that people have. But because sometimes there is non-linearity in reality and we want to capture that non-linearity, I'm going to use dummy codes as the way to capture that non-linearity. So let's go back, Evan, to figuring out about Sebastian. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create dummy codes. I'm going to start off with $10 being in the base case, and so I've got $12.50 is a variable, and another one I'm going to call $15 is another variable. And so what I'm going to do is wherever it's $12.50, I'm going to put a 1. And I'm asking you to keep me honest. If I make a mistake, let me know. Did I just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? And then any that are $15, I'm putting a 1. Right, so I've got all these for $15. Control F. Replace all the missing with zeros. Okay, this should be good. And so any place that it is not $12.50 and it's not $15, that's where it's 10. And so I will be able to assume that the evaluation of all those alternatives that are $10 is in that intercept term. And so then I just need one for the kind of service. So the service in this case, I'm going to have a variable I'm going to call table. This is a 1 wherever it's table service and a 0 everywhere else. 0 then this is table. And then for distance, I'm going to also assume potential nonlinearity. And so for distance, I'm going to call this one 10 minutes and this one 15 minutes. So I'm going to put a 1 wherever it's 10. There it is. And on this one for 15, I'm going to put a 1 wherever it's 15-minute distance. Did I get them? Sure. 3, 4, 6. Okay. Oh, by the way, sometimes on a baking show, television baking show, the morning show, where they say, hey, we're gonna bake a cake, and they put it in the oven, and then they got another oven, and they open it up, and they take the cake right out, already baked. For those who are struggling or just want to double check on the dummy codes, there's a tab called DC, and I've got all the dummy codes ready to go, so that if you want to copy and paste right in, everything's there for you, just to make it easier. But I wanted you to see how we built them right here from scratch. Okay, Evan, Sebastian, are you ready? Ready. Okay, so now I'm ready to go. I'm going to say data analysis. I'm going to say regression. My dependent variable is still Sebastian's ratings. The independent variables is the set of dummy codes. That goes from Thai food to 15 minutes away, and I'm going to select all of that. And I'm going to click labels. And now you'll see that I'm able to run this analysis, right, Coco? Because I don't have any more categorical variables. I've actually got numerical values of 0s and 1s in here. Is everybody ready for me to say okay? Maybe need 1 second sometimes. Hang on. So what I want to focus on is I'm going to focus on Sebastian's coefficients here. So I'm just going to, so that we can grab these out of the way. Let's put this up. So these are the part worths that we have estimated for Sebastian. So let's start off with the intercept. Show of hands, who knows what the intercept means? What is in the intercept? Anybody push your hand up? Let's see. Kirk, would you interpret the intercept for us?
Barbecue.
$10
$10 price point, counter service, and 5 miles, or 5 minutes.
5 minutes away, right? And so what is in the intercept? The intercept is an estimate of the evaluation of the alternative that's in the base case. The intercept is an estimate of the alternative for which all of the dummy variables were 0. The intercept is an evaluation of the alternative that does not have any of these values from tide all the way down to 15. And so in this case, it is our estimate of what Sebastian would give to a Mexican restaurant, or rather a barbecue restaurant, that is $10, that has counter service that is 5 minutes away. And we can really think about that intercept as containing 3 important elements. One element is Sebastian's just average rating for restaurants in general, right? Because it could be that he just, I don't like to go out to eat at all, but if I gotta go out to eat, I like Mexican a little bit less than Thai, and I like Mexican, or rather I like barbecue a little bit less than Mexican, and I like barbecue quite a bit less than Thai, but my ratings could be lower, and then the overall intercept value could be lower, and the difference between that and all of the possible alternatives could still be the same. So in that is sort of an average rating for restaurants, and it's also in there, as we can think of as the part words for the held out value, which is barbecue, $10, counter service, that's 5 minutes away. And then the third thing that's in there is error, because it's just an estimate, it's not going to be perfect, but it's my best guess as to what his rating would be. And then, what I have is the part words, the amount of adjustment that I would make if in fact it was not a barbecue restaurant, but instead it was a Thai restaurant. His rating, we expect, goes up quite a bit because he seems to like Thai relative to barbecue. If it's Mexican, his rating goes up just a little bit. As the price goes up, you can see that his utility diminishes. And you can see that he also does not like table service relative to counter service, and he prefers things that are closer rather than farther. And in fact, so we can now start to think of for Sebastian, what would be the best possible alternative, right? And so I'm always going to include the intercept. And then what would be better than what's in the intercept? Well, if it's a Thai restaurant, it's better, not Mexican. Not if it's $12.50, not if it's $15 doesn't make it better. Table service doesn't make it better. 10 minutes doesn't make it better. 15 minutes doesn't make it better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply this times this to get an estimate of what the best restaurant would be. And I can drag these down. And we'll take the sum of these. And so I have an estimate now for Sebastian. How would he like is the best possible alternative is a Thai restaurant that is $10 that has counter service that's only 5 minutes away, and my estimate is that he would give us a 10.9. Yes?
Is there an inherent assumption in the pricing that goes with the quality of the food, or like is there a way to split that out?
So there's 2 ways to think about this. So one possibility, as we start to think about the interactions and the inferences that people make, that might be perfectly okay. Right? So the fact that he's assuming something is better from the price might be exactly what we want to do, because there might be reasons why we might want to charge more. We might actually get people to prefer. So if I were to say, hey, we're all going on a trip to New York City, and I found us a hotel that we're going to stay in, and it's $24 a night, you would probably say, that is probably a dodgy hotel, and I don't want to stay in that hotel, and yet it's so inexpensive. And so you're making inferences, and it makes sense to make inferences. And for product categories, particularly where consumers don't know a lot about them, it's difficult for them to evaluate, and in particular, those product categories where even after you have experienced it, it's hard to evaluate. Price can be a really important cue in terms of the evaluation of products. So when you go to I mean, a lot of us are married, or have been married, and you remember when you were first dating and you first had to meet your in-laws, and you went to the wine store because you were gonna bring a bottle of wine. If you don't know anything about wine, it's like, well, I wanna get something good. And what do you do? It's like, well, you know, second least expensive or something like that. It's, you know, you choose based on price. And then even after you have the wine, is that good wine? Well, the price itself might even influence the way you evaluate it. So the features might be influenced by the price. So if I were to tell you that we're going to stay at a place called Motel 6, and the countertops are made of concrete, you'd come in and you'd say, wow, concrete, this is like, feels like I'm incarcerated or something. And yet, I could also say we're going to this boutique hotel that's $400 a night, and the countertops are concrete, and say, oh wow, that's really stylish. And so the very same attributes might be evaluated differently depending upon what you think. So there are instances in which that's important. On the other hand, there may be instances where we do not want people to make inferences about the price, in which case, as we develop the study and we ask people to respond, we would put some things in to make it clear that the attribute values do not change as a result of the price, that this is what it is. And sometimes the way to do that is we might actually, you know, if we gave it, like if it was food examples where we actually let people try the food and we say, well, here's what the price is for this one, maybe they would make inferences about like, well, it's got low quality ingredients that I can't tell. But we could do some things to try and control for that. Good question, yeah.
Professor, is there a way to quantify these elements that you're talking about into the model? Like, taking an example of that New York hotel, like, let's say $75 per night, but it's like a Fairfield.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, like, okay, this is bare minimum, but since it's a Fairfield, like, there are certain things that I can, like, get probably, like, the bed is going to be fine, it will be bare minimum clean. So are these things fitted into the model?
So I can't tell here, I have no way of knowing whether Sebastian made assumptions about the price in this particular model. If in your example you used a brand name that people, you're assuming that the respondent knows what that brand name is and what that brand name means, and so what you're saying is that the same low price with that brand name might not diminish the ratings as much as the low price with a no-name hotel. And that would mean that you've got an interaction between the brand name and the price. And so I might then, when I collect the data, collect it a little bit differently to ensure that I can capture that interaction term. So there are ways to quantify it. We can't with the data that we have here. If it had been important to us, and we thought, Evan and I initially said, yeah, well, we've been in the business a long time, and we know something about how people evaluate these particular attributes, then maybe we would do something.
Okay. So maybe like for Mexican, if there's like a Chipotle variable that like is it part of the chain, and basically feed that into the...
Correct, yep, so we can include that. We could include it if we thought that it was going to be important. In this case, we're okay, so I now have Sebastian's best possible alternative, and I'm just going to copy this data here, and I'm just going to shift over here, and I'm going to say Control V. And let's see what's the worst. What could we do if we wanted to make Sebastian as unhappy as possible? Anybody want to volunteer to tell me what Sebastian's worst is? What's the worst possible? How do we make him as unhappy as possible? No one wants to make him Sebastian. He's a good guy. What would make him the least happy?
Expensive barbecue
Right,
as far away as
so we're
possible.
going to leave barbecue. We're going to make it expensive.
Run a finance book.
We're going to make him wait at the table for someone to come and be nice to him. And we're not going to make it as far away as possible. For whatever reason, it looks like 10 minutes away is slightly worse than 15 minutes away. Now my guess, I don't know for sure, so now getting back to what Drew was asking about, and your name is Tony. Tony was sort of asking about like the inferences that we make from these variables. It looks as though 5 minutes away is in the intercept. And then if we make it 10 minutes away, you can see that Sebastian got 1.7 utils, 1.8 utils less happy with 10 minutes away, and then was a tiny bit happier with 15 minutes away. chances are the difference between these two very small, that's probably, I don't know for sure, but my guess is just noise. And that really what it is that his model is not a linear decreasing preference for distance, but that it's a threshold. Sebastian is a busy man. He's in a rush, he's got things to do. I never go to a restaurant or don't like any restaurant that's more than 6 minutes away. Anything more than that, and it makes me very unhappy. And after that, I could care less, because that means once I gotta go, and I'm indifferent to the difference between those two, is probably what's going on here. But this is my estimate for what's the worst. So I'm gonna say exactly right. Equals, okay, so I did capture this. Good. It worked. Okay, and so so the lowest possible value down here tells me how unhappy he is. And you can see for Sebastian, there's a great deal of variance in his preference. In fact, from the best to the worst is 11.6, at least an estimated 11.6 rating points. And we won't get into, it's outside of the range that we actually asked about, but we'll be fine. These are our best guesses. Because ultimately what we're going to do is we're not only going to look at Sebastian, and we're going to look at lots and lots of individuals. However, let's think about this. All the way down at the bottom, with Sebastian being very unhappy, is the restaurant that has these features to it. Right? So that it is a barbecue restaurant that's $15 with table service, and it's 10 minutes away. And all the way up at the top, it's a Thai restaurant that is $10 with counter service, and it's 5 minutes away, and his rating moves from one to the other. But Evan and I need to know which attribute is most important to him, so that we can start to think about, if we are to make an investment, where are the investments really going to count to be able to move Sebastian on that scale from the very bottom to the very top. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to estimate for Sebastian what the relative importance is. Relative importance. And in order to do this, I'm going to think about what each of the attributes are. So I've got the cuisine, and I've got the price, cuisine, and I've got the price, and I have the service type, and I have the distance. And then what I want to do is I want to look at what the absolute value of movement is for each one of the attributes independently. And so the way I'm going to do that is, for cuisine, I'm going to think about what is the highest possible rating and what is the lowest possible rating, and I'm going to take the difference between them. Now, keeping in mind that the amount that I add or subtract that's in the intercept is equal to 0. So for cuisine, I'm just going to take the absolute value. We'll see if this does it really make a difference for him. It doesn't in this case. Of the difference between equals the absolute value of the difference between the best possible alternative and the worst, which is when it's barbecue, and so I'll just put it at 0 here. And so his ratings move, or can move, depending on the cuisine, by 2.83 utils. And then for price, how much movement? Well, the best possible case, I'm just doing this for certainty, I don't really need it here, is from 0 in the intercept to $15. And so on price, his movement from the worst to the best possible price is 6.16 noodles, so bits of preference. And for service, equals the absolute value of the best minus the worst is 0.8, and for distance equals the best, to 0 in this case, because that's in the intercept, minus the worst, which is 10 minutes away. And if I add these up, sum equals sum. If I add these up, what does this equal? This comes out to be the exact same 11.6 that we saw, which is the difference between the best and the worst. But now I've got it broken out by each one of the variables. And so now if I start to think, what's the most important? Well, that's the one that really changes his ratings a lot. What's the least important? It's the one that doesn't. So you can already see that price is clearly, for Sebastian, the most important attribute. And what's not as important, service looks like the least. And in fact, I can figure out the relative importance by taking this value, and then I'm just gonna divide it by the sum. Right, and so we can think about this as 24% of his movement in preference comes from cuisine. And 53% of his movement in preference comes from price, 7% comes from service, and 15% comes from the distance. Just for triple check, this should equal 1. Sure enough, it does equal 1. So this is a way of thinking about, relative to one another, which attribute does he care about the most? It looks like price. Evan, is that at all informative to us as we're building our restaurant?
Very much.
Right, because what does it say? Let's not invest in having it doesn't matter, counter table service. Probably. It might, if right on the margin, it might make a different choice, but probably not. What I gotta focus on, if I can, if everybody's like Sebastian, I really got to focus on the price. Yeah.
I mean, to that point, wouldn't you then make the counter versus table service based on what the overall price, what it would do to price?
That's probably so, right. So I might choose the least expensive one for me, which in my case is counter, which will allow me to offer at a lower price, which will allow me to better satisfy customers like Sebastian. It looks like the cuisine is the next most important thing, so that's why I might put my money there. And in terms of where I rent the place, if I haven't wrapped up the cuisine problem, then I won't concern myself with the rent quite as much. So that's sort of helping me, assuming everyone's like Sebastian, which in fact we're going to find out in a minute, maybe they're not, and so maybe we're going to do some different things. But I can do this for each, I can take an average of these, and then, Nanda, if I wanted to, I could then go back and maybe segment them based on what's important to people, and I might actually find that there's different groups of people that find different things important. And tomorrow, when we do segmentation, we'll be able to come back to this today to find those groups of people that are different. Nanda.
Maybe I have a very generic question. This is one way of understanding what is the best way to invest based on the factors. We have taken other classes like strategy, where we use Porter's 5 forces, where differentiation is a factor, and all those. How do we make a combined decision using this and that, the combination of marketing analysis and
I love
product?
this. So let me point out. Let's go back to those 5 C's, remember? We're only answering the customer C right now.
Okay.
Porter's 5 forces are going to bring in some questions about the competition and the context and the market overall, right? And we have to answer those questions as well when we make our decision. So it's a different model, but the factors are still the same. This is telling us a little bit about what the customers want. But we don't even know yet. The one that we're going to invest in might already, I haven't even looked carefully, it could actually be Brian's restaurant is already doing that, right? Or it could be they're not doing that, but I recognize that Brian is very capable of coming in and doing exactly what I do, particularly if price is the most important thing and I offer at the lowest price.
You can drop 2.
And if Brian lowers his price, Sebastian's going to be quite happy, going to get a lot of surplus for him because he'll be able to eat at any restaurant he wants at a low price. And Brian is now losing money, and Evan is now losing money. Maybe we're all going to be losing money for a while until one of us can weather the storm, or we can come up with a way to legally convince Brian to raise his prices, which has got its own set of problems. It turns out it's against the law for us to meet together and set the prices. That's called colluding, and you're not allowed to do that, and you can get in big trouble for doing that, and so we're not going to do that. But I could do some things, or sort of think, I'm sure you learned about this in your classes, your strategy class. So I might be able to come up with ways to signal to Brian that we're going to raise the price. I might announce, you see the airlines do this all the time when they raise the prices, an announcement, we're raising the prices, and they make it public that prices are going to go up at this particular time, and then they raise the prices, and then they wait to see, do the other airlines follow? And if the other airlines don't follow, then maybe now we're going to have to lower our prices again because it's not worth it. And then maybe we'll try it again. We'll raise the prices. We need them to believe that it's credible that the price is actually going to come up. And we haven't colluded. We've just we've signaled, and maybe that don't work, maybe there's some other things that we can do.
What I'm understanding is this is part of the analysis, there's more to it for us to
Absolutely.
get to a decision based on numbers.
Correct, yeah. So wait till we get there, and then we'll come back. In fact, I think at the end of any class that you have where you come to a number, and the number says, here's what we should do, particularly because the numbers, look, we've used a lot of fancy regression analysis, and we can get things with high R squares, and we can get things out to many, many decimal points. There's a sense of certainty about them. But if you don't take that number and say, well, wait a minute, what would really happen? What is this going to do to our competition? What is it going to do to our relationship with collaborators that we might have? What is it going to do to, or how it might be influenced by contextual factors that might be changing? All of those things have to come back into play as we decide. And then that's even before we said, is this model really any good? Right? Is it like, does it really capture, right? Because maybe even this has its own level of error in it. Maybe we didn't ask enough people, so the size of the sample isn't right. Maybe the sample isn't actually representative of the populations. So all of the questions that we have about the quality of the data, and then once we accept the quality of the data implications, all the questions about the bigger implications are important. So we'll get back to that. Let's at least assume right now that this is valuable, and then we will add in our concerns and the limitations of the data.
Guys, I have a question about this.
Yeah.
So if the value intercept for 15 minutes is a positive, let's say positive 1.7, not negative,
Yeah.
would the value be 1.8 plus 1.7 one absolute distance?
Correct. Yeah, so that would be right, and so that would mean that there's more movement, so let's just do for the sake of, right, so if this was, you're saying 1.7, right, that would mean that equals, I should go to the absolute value of, right, then it goes from here to here, if this were the case, right, then his rating would move by 3.5 U-holes dependent on how far away it is, and so that would mean that that is more important. And I'll also point out, if this is indeed the case, here it looks like he values 15 minutes more than he values 10 minutes away. That can actually happen. Come in 1 second. When I lived in Manhattan, there was a really nice restaurant that was in the building right next door to where we lived. And we never went there. Because if we're going to put on our fancy clothes and we're going out tonight, we want to go some distance to give it some gravity. And so there can be cases where things are too close. Or maybe Sebastian is interested in getting exercise at lunch, and so I don't want to go to the place that's close, and so we could possibly see this. Frank?
Can you explain what Coco just said, where you changed, like, I'm trying to articulate why you did that.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. So let me do that. So what all Coco was asking, at least I think that what she was asking, she can agree with, let us imagine that when we ran this analysis, instead of getting negative 1.7, if we had estimated this to be positive 1.7, because Sebastian had rated those that were 15 minutes away quite a bit higher than the other, which would have been, what would that have meant for the relative importance? Well, what that would mean is that his preference changes depending upon the distance, not by not by 1.8 U-holes, right, which is the difference between the 10 minutes 1.8 away and the 0 that's in the intercept, but instead would have changed by 3.5 U-holes, which is the difference between the highest possible value and the lowest possible value. And so that would have meant for him that his overall importance of distance is that much more. Because you can see that his overall preference rating changes more with changes in distance.
So he prefers 5 minutes, but if it's 15 minutes, then it has
Yeah,
So positive incremental value compared to maybe it was 10 minutes.
and so in this case, he prefers 10 minutes. More than 5 minutes by 1.7 units.
No, but 15
Oh,
minutes.
15 minutes, I'm sorry, 15 minutes he prefers by 1.7 units. Yeah.
But if it's 10 minutes away, he sees that as a negative.
That's worse, right. And so what does his preference look like? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
Got it,
So it would be a U-shaped relationship between preference and the amount of distance that he has.
Okay,
Make
thank
sense? Okay, good.
So I had a quick question. So in this case, we only had like 3 options in the price.
Yeah.
Like what if the price was like $10 all the way to $50
Yeah.
in the data? Price will still be a factor, but then how do you arrive at that sweet spot where the hotel, like if I want to open like a restaurant, that'll be the best price point that I should sell customers like Sebastian?
So I can't ask about every possible price in a conjoint analysis for a couple of reasons. One is that we generally want to be balanced in the number of levels that we have under each attribute. So if I've got 3 cuisines, I don't want to have 15 different prices. If I've got 3 cuisines, I don't want to have 15 different distances or 15 different decor styles or colors. And the reason for that is that would mean that there would be more variance when I ask the participants more variance in one of the attributes, because it would have to vary over all those possibilities than the others. And we found in a variety of research studies that when people respond to questionnaires, they pay more attention to those attributes that have more variance in them. And so what that does is it tends to inflate the importance of those attributes that have more variance. And so we try to keep it as balanced as possible. So if we keep it balanced, that would mean probably if I've got 3 of everything else, I'll probably have 3 or 4 price points and not too many more. And your question is, but then how do I know exactly where that sweet spot is? That's the same problem that I tend to have with almost any pricing problem, is that if I don't ask exactly about the price that's going to give me the optimal price, I might not know for sure. But what I can do is I can make some inferences. Right, so I can build a demand curve from the set of prices that I have. How many units do I sell at each one of those prices? And then I can make some inferences about how many units I would sell between there, assuming if there's 15 people choose it at a price of $10 and only 10 people choose it at a price of $15, I'm going to assume somewhere along the line I'm losing 5 people across all of those possible prices. And the best I can do is I can make an inference that we're somewhere in the middle as to how many units that I would sell. Then I can go back and start to think, what is the optimal price that I can charge relative to that demand being accurate? And if it's $1 billion decision and I really want to be sure about what the price is, then I can run a variety of very specific pricing studies, or maybe I really will offer it in the test markets at different prices and see what the actual demand is. That's real consumers exchanging real dollars for real stuff. That's pretty good evidence as to what's going to happen, assuming that the competition doesn't do some different things. But pretty good evidence. If that's important to me, I'll spend that extra money and time in order to find that out.
So, but yeah, so the takeaway is like in conjoint analysis, the variables or the variance should be limited to like more like 2 or 3 variables, not more than that, because then it adds a lot of noise in the.
We want to have a balanced level of, a balanced number of levels under each attribute in general, or else it might inflate the importance. And we're sort of limited to the number of attributes and levels that we can have because that increases the number of questions that people have to answer. And so one way that we solve that problem is through the fractional factorial design, but even that, there's some limits to what we can do as we increase the number of levels under each attribute. That is going to increase the size of the design. And so there's always that trade-off between having a high quality data and having high quantity of data. So this is generally the way that we would give you. People will always tell us what's being done. Okay, so I now have, was there one more question? I just want to make sure I'm following up on everybody. Okay, so I've now got, I ran the regression, I got Sebastian's hard worths, I figured out his best, I figured out his worst, I figured out the relative importance. I can show you, I'm going to grab this data here. just for fun, this Control V, let's make this as $10 and $10. This, by the way, is 0 because that's in the intercept. So let's actually take a look. I can plot his price sensitivity. Now, remember when we asked him before, it looked like he was steeper between $12.50 and $15. In reality, when we've actually done this using this decompositional method, it looks like he's got greater price sensitivity. First of all, nonlinear, and so I'm glad that I modeled this using the dummy variables to be able to see that nonlinearity. And I see that he's quite price sensitive between $10 and $12.50, and a little bit less between $12.50 and $15 because that slope is not that steep. And I will point out, Nicola, that these are equidistant, $2.50 apart, so the distance between them. So the slopes actually are representative. In fact, I could measure what those slopes are. And that tells Evan and I something about the likelihood is quite high that I will lose Sebastian as a customer if I raise the price from $12.50 to $10, from $10 to $12.50. Now, not necessarily that I would lose him, but it just makes it more likely that there's a competitor out there that might be able to get him to come if I were to raise the price, because it's really going to change his rating a lot. Raising from $12.50 to $15 is not going to change his rating that much, so it makes it less likely that he would switch, but of course it depends on what's out there in terms of the competition. So that's informative to me, is what the shape of that curve looks like for each individual that's in my sample, as I use those individuals to make inferences about what the overall population looks like. Okay, so what else might I be able to do with this data? Thus far, I have information about Sebastian, but we don't want to know about just one customer. Instead, what we want to do is we want to try and make estimates about multiple people. We want to know what the entire market looks like. And so what I can do is I can try and get an estimate of market share as well. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to my preference data, and let's take a look at a few other folks. So I'm going to say data analysis, regression, and the Y range instead of Sebastian is, let's look at Christopher. Is it Christopher or Christoph? Here's Christoph. Let's do this.
It's Chris.
Was it just Chris is what we're looking for? So I'm actually going to do this. Okay. Let's go back to our restaurants over here. So this is Chris, right? And what I can see is that Chris, this is as close to 0 as I can get. That's 5.12 times 10 to the negative 16. So it is a very, very small number, so basically 0, which suggests that Chris is indifferent between Thai food and barbecue food, but he likes Mexican food quite a bit more. Chris, where are you? Oh, over here, okay. It looks like his preference diminishes as the price goes up, and I can see without even plotting this that this is linear, right? So with every $2.50 that the price goes up, he is 1 util less happy. I can see that he likes table service better than counter service. And he's fairly indifferent in terms of distance. These are very, very small numbers. It looks like he likes 10 minutes a little bit less and 15 minutes a little bit more. So that's what I know about Chris. And then I'm going to go back to the data that I got for Sebastian, and I'm going to grab his coefficients, and then I'm going to go back over here. One more person, back to my preference data, and I'm going to say data analysis regression one more time. We'll just randomly pick someone. There we go. Oh, did I say my color was 0 on here? Let's see how this goes. Okay. barbecue restaurant at $15 with table service and 15 minutes away. So barbecue is in the Intercept, and it's $15. So here's $15, and it's got table service, so table service, and it is 15 minutes away. So now I'm going to figure out an estimate of what Chris thinks about Randall's Restaurant. It's this times this. And so my estimate of Chris's evaluation of Randall's Restaurant is 4.88. And then let's do this again. Let's see what Sebastian thinks. My estimate of Sebastian is quite a bit less happy than Chris's, -0.6. And then we'll do this again for Nicola. And Nicola's, my estimate about what Nicola would think about this restaurant is 3.06. So based on the part worths that I have calculated from my regressions, I'm able to get estimates about what these three individuals are likely to think about this particular restaurant. And so then what I can do is the same thing for these other restaurants. So this is Brian's place. Brian's The Spice. The Spice. And so that is going to have, the Intercept is present, and then Brian's restaurant, we'll just see, is a Thai restaurant. So it's a Thai restaurant, and it's just and the price is $12.50, and it's got counter service, so not table service, so I'll leave that blank. And it is 10 minutes away. So this times coefficient. Sum of these. Here's my estimate that Sebastian would give it a 4.76, and Nicole would give it a 5.56. So these are the two restaurants that are in the market right now. Which do I think Chris would choose? I think he would choose Brian's because it's 5.12, and Randall's is only a 4.8. So I think that's score one for Brian. And then which do I think that Sebastian would choose? Also choosing Brian's. And which do I think that Nicola would choose? Also choosing Brian's. So thus far, it looks like 100% of the market goes to Brian, and thus far 0% of the market goes to Randall. Now there's other consumers out there, we've only looked at 3 of them, but I'm able to get, even with a small valuation, just a little bit about market share. And now let's sort of see, Evan, how would we do in getting that market share? Evan and Andy's. And so our restaurant was described as Mexican $10. So we got the Intercept. It's Mexican. It's $10. So it's none of these prices. And what kind of service did we have? We had counter service, so not table service. And we're 5 minutes away, so none of these go here. So just these two. Is this times the coefficient. How we do? Right, so it looks like we were able to steal one customer, so, right, so far, let's see, a little bit better. we did pretty well. All right, so as it turns out, okay, so as it turns out, which one would Chris pick? It looks like Chris would pick Andy's place. And which one would Sebastian pick? Looks like he would pick Andy's place. Evan, you sure you want to be in business with me?
Now that it's successful, it's Andy's.
Now
place.
that you notice it.
Drop Evan real fast.
And you'd see that, you would also get,
Partnership.
okay, so, all right, so what have I been able to do just to like sort of review? We built a model to understand the little bits of work that a sample of consumers place on each one of the levels of each of the attributes. We collected the data holistically so that people evaluated the alternatives in their entirety. Then we use ordinary least squares regression to decompose the ratings to be able to get what those part worths are. The part worths are these little bits of value that are placed on each one of the levels of the attributes. And then we can use them to be able to figure out what's the best alternative for an individual. We can figure out what's the worst alternative for an individual. We can figure out what the relative importance is for an individual. And of course, if we can do it for an individual, we can get the average relative importance across multiple individuals. We can get an understanding about price sensitivity. We can plot that price sensitivity for an individual. If we can do it for one, we can do it for multiple. And then we can think about configurations that may or may not already exist. So here we've got two configurations that might be in the market, Randall's and Brian's. We can get an estimate about what market share is, which, by the way, is a little bit of a test of whether our model is any good. Because those businesses might already be in the market, and based on other data, we might know something about what the actual market share is. And then we can see, does this capture the actual market share that's already in the marketplace? We can see how well that is, maybe make some adjustments. And then finally, we can start thinking about what would happen if we introduced some other configuration. And so Evan and I came up with another configuration, and we can see how much market share that we would get. And this is only with 3 individuals. I will tell you, for the homework assignment that you're working on with your teams, what I want you to do is collect data just for 10 individuals. Right? You don't have to do the whole class. For 10 individuals, run the analysis for 10, and you're going to do your market share based on 10. So how many out of those 10 you select? Does that make sense? Pretty geeky cool? Okay.
I love it.
Okay, good. So now, let's take it a step further. We're going to do a couple of other things. How are we, Brandon, on time?
Break.
When's the next break?
Now.
Is it right now?
Yeah.
Quick one. It is in fact now. But when you come back,
That's what you say.
but this really isn't Evan's in charge. So when you come back, we are going to take this to the next level. So this is all you need for your homework. You're in good shape. And by the way, one last thing. Do you remember when you were a youngster and you climbed up to the top of the slide and your knees were shaking and you were nervous about going down? And who was at the bottom of the slide?
Nobody.
No, not nobody.
You don't know.
We had different childhoods.
Someone down at the bottom of the slide. So, for you, because you're going to need to do this real homework. Wasn't that good? Well, he's there now.
He's here now.
Who's your daddy? Here's everything we did today. Here's the data. Here's how we use it to build the dummy codes. Here's how we do the regression, how you interpret those regressions. Here's how we find the best and worst configurations. Here's how we figure out relative importance that we just did, plotting price sensitivity, estimating market share. So everything that we did, so that is a study guide that you can go back and you can repeat it. Everything is here. And this is posted and will be posted up on here. So take a break when you come back, next level fun stuff. So, and that means at 11 o'clock, right, Brandon? Okay, I'll make it.
11 o'clock sharp.
Do it.
What's that?
Yeah, of course.
Like, would you have to switch? Would you have to like recreate new password?
And the opportunity to meet with me again in person, if they still have questions. So that was my concern. Okay, someday, like there's a time to start all doing it once. Yes, that's sort of spacing it out. You can control it. In fact, I'm gonna get your
Well, I mean, I set mine up in Mac, like, it's not nice. Like, I'll try to put it in mine. I might just have to create a brand.
I did not even think about. I think so, yeah. I thought I could. This is cool. Because you could choose something kind of 3 hours.
Yeah.
I will double check on it because I don't want to. Sure.
I'm
trying to make it easier.
Right. Yeah, no, all the scheduling stuff.
Can I go to a bathroom first?
Yeah.
No.
That's where you feel what
Yeah,
I mean, if it's like Berkshire Community College.
Yeah, that's me. My sister went to school, what is now called UMass North Dartmouth. Which is basically Providence. And my friend's uncle was Providence, Rhode Island, bigwig in politics, which makes me wonder.
It's like the politics.
Politics in Rhode Island.
It's a little,
He was a bigwig at one point. And he got his tickets to see Rush at the Providence Civic Center. Was it Rush still? Yeah, so we say it's still paired. Because I was there, this was like 35.
Yeah, I did my undergrad out at RPI, so.
Multiple regression.
Regression, yeah, different.
Now that's the school, engineering school, just outside of Hall. Okay, yeah, so I grew up in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. Oh, so you.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, same place. We would drive over them, so back, it used to be that the liquor laws were 18 in Vermont, and I think it was 19 in New York. Right around the time that I turned. It mattered. In fact, getting liquor, say, OTF, over the mountain. Because you go up and over, and you go to the liquor store to get much. And we would drive this road, but we often go see shows in Albany.
Oh, yeah.
Cool. My son applied and almost went to RTI for engineering, but ended up, he wanted to do, what do they call it, SAE, the race car.
Oh, yeah.
And we went.
Society of Automotive.
I think that's it, yeah. And we drove in to take a look at UT Arlington.
Yep.
Which is not like known as a top school, but it's a decent place. But they've got their race team, for whatever reason, has got faculty that work, and they're like, they typically come in the top 5 in the country.
Yeah.
So my son went there initially, and then COVID came, and then he came home and then he switched to UT here. And that's well, so he's also an engineer, but we're almost one top of the eye, we actually thought it was a good place to do it.
I went back. Last year.
Oh,
I was going through it.
You're doing your vote?
I was computer science. For different approach. It's almost, you know, I don't know if it'll do it, I'm sure they've been a massive.
So now it says what you want.
We're like, we had a department of computer science.
Having that program. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The word is like it's capable of taking the job of the junior program. Well, we're gonna need senior programmers at some point to make the decisions about what you want things to do and have an understanding about how they work and how to, you know. So. I hope that there's this gap.
Yeah.
And then there'll be a dearth of the people that we need because they didn't come up through the.
Right, right, like go through the paces.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. Well, I'm glad you're here.
Oh, me too.
Do I need to cooperate with that or?
You're good. Thanks for being here. Do you know where Jared is sitting?
I just realized, having introduced myself, we just met virtually.
Oh, you.
Yes, yes, nice to meet you. How's everything going?
Going well, and I met.
Brienne.
Yeah, right.
Yes, yeah,
And
and
she had
Rebecca's
also
around.
met virtually, and Rebecca. Thank you very much for everything you're doing here.
Yeah, likewise, thank you for being here.
And if students are asking things that I can do differently, you just come and talk to us.
Likewise, thank you.
Oh, actually, that's a question. Yes. Come on. Let me check. It involves the timing of the exam, whether it interferes with anything related to a trip to DC. What I do is just follow the model like some day from last year until the beginning of things. And it occurred to me to check with conflict. So I think that I can
Pretty good place, football was 1 and 2.
1 and 2. I won't tell you who my heart is with more than the other. Actually, I don't mind IPC, so it's actually kind of fun. Yeah, 1 and 2 this year. They both were in the semifinal last year. I was like, come on, I've got a 50% chance they both won.
Well, about 2, the fact that like there's so much experience, right? A lot of the
find that when grades full semester grading, they don't need, you know, just course.
It's a preseason poll, I don't care. If you're in the top 5,
Meetings, of course, and it's.
I hate preseason polls in general because they actually do matter, which is really stupid. Because depending on when you lose and where you start, like it absolutely plays an influence. Yeah, because it's always you lose 5 spots with a loss, and so if you start high, you lose your 5 spots, you have the 7. You can work your way back. You're still in the playoff. You're pretty much still in the playoff spot with a loss, or even 2 actually, which is in front of the line a lot of times. So, but in general, if you're in the top, frankly, if you're in the top, a whole lot. But having Penn State ranked that high anyway, I'm skeptical because Franklin is the most conservative coach in a big game. It sucks at big games as a coach. So
hopefully we can
Texas and Ohio State. Hopefully they lose to both Penn State and Texas. What's that?
So be careful, guys.
Hopefully they lose to both Texas and Penn State and life will be great. That's right. You've got your fair share already then.
You're coming off of the championship. Although it's a shared national championship, technically.
Shared.
Oregon, technically.
Oh, that's shared voting doesn't matter anymore with the playoff, which is great.
I think we were one for one game, but yeah.
It's true, but the NCAA recognizes a number of official polls in Oregon have to finish one.
Oh, yeah. Were you like an Alabama fan or something who claims like every
Am I an Alabama
every
fan?
time the newspaper writes that they're a national champion, they claim it on their score, on their.
Auburn did that.
I saw it. My son goes to Alabama. Nothing was more infuriating than Alabama.
That's what our rival Washington said. They had an 0-12 season, and they did that during they claimed an old title to like have something to celebrate. It's great. Are you a Penn State?
Yeah, I graduated from Penn State.
We've got a big game. Oregon.
Whiteout night. Whiteout night against Oregon.
Whiteout
night's Penn State are really fun. Really fun.
All those fans will be disappointed. It's sad.
It's a big game. Penn State sucks in big games. Phenomenally, but
What is she, I guess?
can't coach him.
She's yeah.
We got Ohio State's defensive coordinator now, so we're gonna do it.
That would be a full-time.
You? You guys hired him why?
We stole away Ohio State's.
Why would he go there?
Because we paid him more money. And Ohio State would have come.
Ohio State lost both coordinators. And you're
Yeah, they didn't invite him to the, because he didn't re-sign his next contract or whatever, they didn't invite him to the national championship celebration on the field, so he left.
Yeah.
Great, Dave's an idiot too, so.
Dave's an idiot?
I hate Dave. I hate Dave.
Every coach is bad in your mind.
No, not really, just.
I'm also a Dave.
I love
But
yeah, we'll have a good discussion before that one.
Well, is that that's what we're saying? I can't remember.
Security aspect was, we get 20 different.
I think the 27th.
Yeah, so.
Once, it's so far.
I did the class. You? I used to. I used to take it over.
We're gonna might put a plan in West Virginia though, so I'll have an excuse now. Go take a long weekend.
And my plans kind of fell through, but we're planning it in the Western this year. So I was hoping that go to Chicago for the weekend.
Penn State actually has a little bit of a cupcake schedule this year. They have Oregon at home, and then they have Ohio State on the road, and everything else should be a win.
We have Penn State and Iowa, but we just Ohio State.
Oh, we know was on that.
No, the conference was like Texas in the morning. That's what they're doing.
Big Ten is masterful.
It's nice because the Pac-12 did not use that. They used to give us like the worst thing. Because they wanted like the 2 games. So they last time.
Well, they intentionally got rid of the divisions because they were way stacked. Well, it was that's right. It was way stacked to make sure whoever came out of the division was going to have a legitimate shot at the national championship. So they made the conference championship game easy.
And London makes me want to joke so much. Weather.
Yeah, I'm a big.
Yeah.
It's alright, at least we have a legacy. Lost to Penn State in the Rose Bowl.
We got Phil Knight.
Yeah,
Phil Knight. I know you play a lot of pickleball.
I used I don't know. Yeah. I don't mind Oregon. Be careful. I might not like Oregon anymore.
Well, we'll see after our thing. Yeah, I mean, it's class. That's the
It's a night game. The whiteout games are always. That is part of the. I'm not gonna always.
It's like their vintage.
We'll have more to say.
It's not that complex. It's actually really nice. It's for pickleball, like 8 of them. It's all indoor. What is it, 145? It's just like.
Well, your neighbor has it.
I gave him like a space.
Everyone like snow day, automatic. I'm pretty sure essentially everyone in the school automatic snow football. It's like 10 o'clock. That one has a shoe. Light on this is regular technology. Shield is regular. Indigo is like I think there is a good job. Come on, you do it. Sorry,
Yeah.
Mine died.
Schools who have a full cycle. That's a joke. You can retire.
He uses weapons.
I don't need to teach them normally just stay but it's open to Okay, so let's bring the plane home. We've got one more hour. I'm going to show you something a little bit geekier than what we've been doing. So up until now, you've seen the skills and tasks that are going to be associated with the homework assignment. So there's a homework assignment and the study guide that you can use. And of course, if you have questions, do get in touch with me. I will help you. I expect everybody will do well on the conjoint analysis assignment. It's an opportunity of learning by doing. And so typically everybody does well. The way in which people tend to lose points on this assignment is they simply don't answer some of the questions from the assignment. It's really easy to do, but for some reason when you get a team of 5 people, everybody thinks somebody else has read all the questions, and then questions don't get answered. So I would say at your first meeting, say who's going to be the person who will read the assignment before we submit it to make sure that we've answered all the questions. If you do that, then you're almost guaranteed to do really well in this. It's just a matter of learning by doing. So what we have done is we've estimated market share. And we've estimated market share in this really small way where we've said there's only 3 individuals in our market, and for your homework you'll have 10. In reality, if I were to run a larger scale conjoint analysis, I might have 300 to 600 participants in the study, and that would mean running an individual regression for each person, which would take a whole lot of time. So there are tools that allow us to run all of these regressions simultaneously, and there are more sophisticated tools that allow us to start to play with this data a little bit. So just for fun, I took the data from this class, and if you go to the tab Market Share Simulator, what we have in the orange box are all of the part words for the individuals who submitted their data in the survey initially. And then what we're going to do is we're going to insert the values for the different restaurants that we have. So Randy, would you remind us what restaurant you had?
Barbecue.
Barbecue, and what price?
$15.
$15, so I'm going to make that 15. And what kind of service?
Table.
Was it table service, not counter service? And what price?
15 minutes away.
15, okay, so 15 minutes away. Okay, so right now, something's broken here, but you should have this and negative value. All right, there's a minor glitch. We'll say it's doing the best that it can. I don't want to go in and debug it. But basically right now, really, since you're the only restaurant in the market, you've got all the market share. And then, Brian, your restaurant is what?
Thai.
A Thai restaurant. And what price?
$12.50.
Oh, not $10, but $12.50. And what kind of service? Counter service or table service? Counter service. And what price?
Price was.
Around the distance. I'm sorry.
Was
10 minutes away? Okay. All right. And so what this tells us is that right now with these two restaurants in the market, it is not the case that Randy has 0% market share. In fact, it looks like he's got about 29% market share, while Brian has about 71% market share. And that's just market share, because it's very possible, look, Randy's restaurant is more expensive. He may actually be making a whole lot more profit than Brian is. But Brian certainly has the most market share. And then Evan, you and I, we don't have a restaurant yet in the market. And so the restaurant that we were thinking of is, what did we say, a Thai restaurant or a
Mexican.
Mexican?
$10.
$10. Counter service.
5 minutes away.
And 5 minutes away, right? And so it looks like with this configuration, we would end up with a market share of 47%. And what would happen is Brian's market share would diminish from 71 down to 33, and Randy's market share would diminish from about 30 to about 20%. So it looks like from this I can see not only would we end up getting a significant level of market share, but we can see where would that market share be coming from. So as I start to think about the competition, who's likely to react, certainly Brian's not going to be happy about this. Right? It looks like he's lost more than half of his customers are coming to me. Randy's a little bit upset about this because it looks like there's a significant percentage here, about 30% of his customers have diminished. And so now that I know where that market share is coming from, that might influence more strategic decisions as Nanda, right? Mm-hmm. Right.
Yes.
So ask like, well, how do we, why do we think about all those other things? Is it possible that I think that coming in with this particular configuration might lead to a strategic retaliatory move by one of these competitors? Well, then I can start to say, well, how easy would it be for them in order to do this? We're serving an entirely different kind of food. And so it's going to be a lot. How does Brian retaliate if really what a lot of people find important is the Mexican plate of food? It's not like he can just turn his Thai restaurant into a Mexican restaurant overnight. But if it's because of the price, then we can start to experiment with, well, what if Brian decides to lower his price? What happens to our market share? Looks like not a lot, right? So Brian's price right now is at $12.50 and he's got 33% share. If he were to lower his price to $10, he's gonna take some share, but barely any, right? And so it looks like the easy thing for him to do, competing on price, is probably not gonna be effective, probably because most of the folks that are coming to us because of the cuisine that we have, not necessarily, or maybe because of the distance that we have, and that's gonna be harder for them to deliver on. So that suggests that maybe this is not as much of a threat, and I'm able to do this without actually physically building anything into the marketplace. Not now, yeah.
Given that the cuisine is the deciding factor for the most part, what if you strategize and say, I'm gonna offer both Thai and Mexican, capture the whole market?
So that could be the case. What's difficult to know, so what I don't know is what happens if he opens up the combination Taco Bell, Pizza Hut that you do, right? So it is possible. My guess, and I don't know, now we have to think from what we know about how these businesses operate, that the evaluation of a Thai place and the evaluation of a Mexican place is not the same as the evaluation of a combination Thai-Mexican place. And so we don't have that data. We might collect data on what that looks like when somebody intends to, because there's the possibility that people would infer lower quality for both of them if there's some kind of combination version, unless it's meant to be like a fusion cuisine or something like that. Yep, question, Brett?
So I was playing around with your simulator here.
Yep.
And what I did was, for Brian, I basically said what Nanda said, right? Where we offer all the cuisines at $10 and kept everything else constant. Why is it that I guess Evan and Andy's restaurant still outperforms the market share? Because you would imagine that if the big driver was cuisine, and if you are satisfying all three of those at a relatively good price point, distance, what have you, you would imagine that the market share would increase significantly. Like
I think what we don't know is that there's some people who would like it less if it has some of these other characteristics. And the model is not built to assume, because what you're doing is you're assuming that that the part worths of the preferences change associated with all three cuisines. So if you like Mexican more than Thai by €1, and you like barbecue more than Thai by €1, if you have both of them, that does not mean that you would actually like that restaurant €2 more. We have no way of knowing what that really means.
Basically, it counteracts with each other.
Yeah, so we don't have any way to measure the interaction, and it's possible that there's some people who are negative. So this model does not allow for you to enter multiple values into. It's sort of like I get a restaurant that serves at $10, $12, $15, and $15.
Like a Cheesecake Factory, right?
You can't. You can't. We would have to have designed it into the study initially. That we're measuring for that, we have not measured for that. So
You have to make a holding category.
we're holding right, fusion combination that we would have had to ask for that in order to find out what people's preferences are. So we just don't have it. Lance and then Jim.
Be the same thing with price, right? Because when I took the survey, I did not assume, I actually would rate something lower if it's $10 because I assume quality is at a higher price point.
So if we were to look at your preferences, Lance,
You'd see some weird data based
so
on.
you're saying that your utility
It just means it's when Randy's ads.
Lance.
Because, yeah, $10 Mexican to me does not sound as good as $15 Mexican.
I did the same.
Right, I did the same.
I did the same.
The distance wasn't as important.
Takeout, I'm gonna walk in, I want to take out.
Those are fake tacos, Lance.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, so in fact, what we see is that your utility goes up. I can see it right here, utility is going up as the price goes up.
Yeah.
And so your consumer who's making inferences that the quality is better as the price goes up. And so what would that suggest is that it might actually be better to charge more rather than charge less, because you're going to come with the assumption that the quality is there. And then I'm assuming, there are a lot of assumptions that based on this, not only are you going to come, you're going to try the restaurant, I'm just assuming you're going to come again. It might actually be that you arrive at a restaurant, food's not very good, and then you might not come again. This model doesn't say anything about retention. We'll talk a little bit more about retention in the future. So all of these things, beat this thing up, totally reasonable to beat up, but put yourself in the shoes of, you're the manager who has to make decisions long before we've actually created the restaurant. We've got some prototypes together, and we're trying to get estimates about what the market is gonna look like. This is better than just shrugging our shoulders and guessing. So we're in a spot where we're able to get at least some estimate of what's going on, and we know that once we do this, there might be tweaks and things that we're gonna have to do in the future, but we go from being this uncertain to being a little bit less uncertain using a model like this. And then I think, Jim, you had
What's the, when you look at the data collection part of that?
Yep.
The amount of variables, when is it useful to become, when it becomes too much data that it's unuseful to actually get to the target?
So typically, there's not any one right answer to that, but typically you try to keep it under 7 different possible attributes and typically 3, 4, 5 different levels under each one. Anything more than that, and the problem is that it expands the number of alternatives, so even if we use a fractional factorial design, it's still a very long list. And then there are even other things that we can do to improve the quality of that. So I might ask the data in different orders of different people, so the quality of the data, even if it diminishes later in the game, does not diminish the same for everybody. I might put breaks in, so I'm gonna ask you about these 5, and then in a few minutes there'll be more. I might give you incentives to pay attention, so if we're asking people who are professionals that maybe they're paid to come in and we ask them, we might use something that's called retest reliability, and that's where I would ask you about some alternatives, and I might come back and ask you about the same alternatives again. At least then I would know whether your data quality are any good. If 10 minutes later you give me a very different answer, that suggests that maybe your data aren't good and I don't want to include them in the analysis. So there are things we can do, but it's never going to be perfect, but it's better than nothing. And I thought this question over here, yeah.
As a practical matter, we're looking at this for a restaurant before entering the market. How often is this analysis something that is redone? And what's kind of like the pricing to do this, using the restaurant as a sort of...
Yeah, I don't know, different consulting companies will charge different things. You typically are going to have to pay your participants some number of dollars as well in order to participate. And so if you've got 600 people participating, then it can be, it depends. It's either quite expensive if you're a small business, in which case you probably, a very small business, wouldn't bother doing this at all. That you might use more qualitative methods and smaller samples, but that would leave you more uncertain. But if you use up all of your budget finding out what the best estimate is, and then you have nothing left to invest to move forward, then if you're going to spend that money anyway, maybe it's just better to spend it and take a flyer based on your gut, if it's going to go anyway, rather than spend it all, have the answer, and then have nothing left in order to act on it. Yeah,
just building on that, like the analysis of the analysis, people go back and look at how well it's tracked to results. And like places where this translated very well, this was consumer behavior, we nailed it in our analysis, versus something didn't translate.
Yeah, and it's never going to be perfect. You can see right now it does not include all of the possible, it doesn't say anything about the parking, doesn't say anything about the cleanliness.
Food quality.
Food quality is a lot of things that are missing from this. But as a first step, it's pretty good to get us going so we have at least some idea, and then from there we'll get that's good. So let me show you one more thing on this. A question might be, can I come up with, for Evan and I, a better configuration in order to gain more market share? For that, I could try all of the possible combinations. Alternatively, I can use Solver to try and get an estimate here. So I can say, Solver, here's what I want you to do. I want you to maximize the market share, so make this as big as possible. And you can do it by changing these values, which are the values of the levels of the attributes. And then I put some constraints on. I want them to be either 0s or 1 because you can't be half a barbecue. And so that's the binary part. And then there's this little thing here which says, O72 to O76 has to be equal to 1. And I'll show you what that is before we run it. Down here is O76 to O72. And what this is the sum of each of these attributes. And what this does is it ensures that I pick at least one and make sure that I don't pick, to Frank's point, picking all of them at once. I can only pick one at a time because I can't have the combination. And so then, if I say solver, let's try to solve this. We'll see who's do it. Solver E7. This one. By changing these payouts. Let's see if it's working. Okay, so now it's trying. My computer's old and slow, so it's going through all of the combinations. It actually seems more exciting when it does take time. If it did it instantly, it would lose the thrill. And let's see if it comes up with a better solution. And Solver's not perfect. It sometimes gets stuck in local maxima or local minima, particularly when it changes multiple variables as opposed to solving for a single variable. But we'll see what it does and see if it gives us Evan and I something that will give us more market share. Yeah, so we could actually get 58% market share. If we go with Mexican, $15, and here's why. So Lance, here we go. It's actually suggesting charging a higher price would be better because there's a lot of people who are making similar inferences, have the table service, but only be 5 minutes away. And in that way, Evan and I can make the most possible market share. And then another thing I can start to think about is, what about profitability? So if I think about profitability, I can build a model that makes some assumptions about what my costs are. So let's assume that I actually do provide higher quality food with higher prices. And so this is my estimate of what it would cost me if I had a barbecue place to offer a meal that costs a customer $15. My kitchen cost might be $6.50. And if I offered it at $12.50, my kitchen cost would be $5.50. So I've got my variable cost per unit here. And then I've got, let's assume, some fixed costs as well that are associated with whether I offer counter service or table service. So this is I gotta pay my staff more for table service than counter service. And let's say that this is some kind of rent cost that I have for 5, 10, or 15 minutes away. Then what I can do is I can make some other assumptions. What I've done is I've taken the sample. I assume that the sample would multiply that by some factor because it's the sample of the overall population. So just for fun, I did by 300. Let's assume that for every person in my study, there are 300 consumers out there that these individuals are representing. If you don't like those numbers, we can change it to something else. That allows me to estimate at a price of $15, I assume that I will sell 7,800 meals, and so I can estimate what my revenue is. Then I've got my variable costs from cost per dish that I sell, my fixed costs from my type of service and how far away I am. We can see that my profit is estimated to be $55,000. So the question is there a different configuration that doesn't give me the most market share, but instead gives me more profit? And maybe that's possible. Again, I'm going to use Solver, and I'm going to say, Solver, here's what I want you to do. I want you to maximize the profit cell, which could already be maximized, but maybe it'll make a change, and do it by making a decision. So it's basically running all the combinations here and seeing if we can come up with profit that might be more than $55,000, even if our market share is less. So we'll give that a go. For your homework, you do not need to do this. This is just to sort of see more about what it can possibly do. And then I'll show you a couple other cool things. Waiting. It was the last time I do this, so don't worry. I'm not going to spend all the class watching this thing spin around.
It's exciting.
It is very exciting. Okay, it came up with something. All right, it looks like it's come up with the same. It turns out the profit is 55. So both the highest market share and high profit is what would work out for us. And that looks like, what do we have? Mexican, $15, table service, at 5 minutes. But it could have been something else and it was something. Okay, so now let me show you one other kind of fun thing. We'll do two other fun things that we can do with this. One is we can look at what price elasticity looks like. So if we charge $10, this is not going to be a good example. Let's try changing Randy's price. Okay. So look what happens to Randy's price. Randy at a price of $10 sells 7 units or 15% of the market share. And if he raises this price to $15, so that's not working, he also sells this. I gotta get some variance so this whole thing doesn't work. $10, $15. I'll do it. This doesn't make sense. So what did we say? Let's look at $10, 14 units is what Brian sells, and at $15, 13 units. What was it, 13 units? Okay, so here's what we have, if I got this right. We have an increase in price of $5. So that's a 50% increase in price from $10 to $15. And as the price goes up, it looks like we sell a few units. We go from 14 units down to 13. And so if we started at $10, we've gone up by 50% in price. And we've come down by 1 over 14 units. Somebody quickly calculate 1 over 14 in terms of a percentage. 1 divided by 14 is 0.07. 0.07. So I've got a 0.07% change divided by a 50% change, which means that the amount of change in demand is very small relative to a giant change in price starting at $10. Does everybody see that? Right? So the price went up by 50% and the demand came down by only 7%. Really, really small amount. And so we would say from this point that the market is fairly elastic or inelastic?
Inelastic.
Inelastic, right? Because that means there's not a lot of change in demand relative to the change in price, which suggests, at least for a restaurant like Brian, go ahead and raise the price, charge the higher price, because the amount of demand does not change a lot relative to the amount of change in price. It's also the case that if I had started at $15 and brought the price down, that would mean going from 15 down to 10 is a what percentage decrease? 33% decrease in price. And if we go from 13 to 14, what percent increase is that? What's 1 over 13? 6%. What is it, 6%? Not much, but the number is 6%. So it's different though, right? And the reason why I want to point this out is that that means that the elasticity from the point $10 going up is different from the elasticity along that same range from $15 coming down. The reason for that is that elasticity measures market sensitivity in percentage change from a single point on that demand line. So how do we talk about the elasticity of the market overall? What we tend to do is think about the elasticity over that range. And so what we're going to do is we're going to figure out a way to approach this is to use something called midpoint elasticity or arc elasticity, which describes it over the range. And all we're going to do is we're going to find the point in the middle where the elasticity going uphill is the same as the elasticity going downhill over this range from $10 to $15. And so you probably saw this if you talked about elasticity in the econ class. If not, don't sweat it. I just want to show you that we can use conjoint analysis as a way to get an estimate of the elasticity. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this midpoint formula, which describes the elasticity over the range from $10 to $15 by looking at, hide a point, the percent change in quantity divided by the percent change in price. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the higher quantity minus the lower quantity divided by the average quantity. So that's essentially what is the percent change from that midpoint on the line. And then we're going to take the price, high price minus the low price divided by the average of those prices. So what's the percent price change from that midpoint in the line? And then we're going to figure out the elasticity there. And if you don't want to use plugging in the values in the formula, I have built here an elasticity calculator, which plugs it all right in. And what we can see, if we plug in these values in elasticity of negative 0.18, when elasticity is less than 1, that means that the denominator percent change is smaller than the numerator change. And so that means that there's not a lot of change in demand relative to change in price. And so we refer to this as an inelastic market. And if it were the other way, if it turned out that the demand change was a lot, and people were really price sensitive, then the demand change would be a lot as a percentage relative to the price change, and then that would be larger than 1, and we would call it an elastic market, because you get a lot of movement in demand relative to price. And so the takeaway is, even with a conjoint analysis where I've not actually launched the product into the market, since I can get estimates of the amount of demand that I would have at different prices, I can use that to develop a demand curve. Remember in your econ class, almost everything in econ class, they draw the L, and then they draw an X inside the L, and then all of the conversations are stemming from that. So this is that downward sloping line, the demand curve. As the price goes up, we expect to sell fewer units, and then elasticity describes the sensitivity of consumers at different points along that line, and we can use the data from a conjoint analysis to get 2 points. If we get 2 points, we get a line. We do that, we can figure out what the sensitivity is of customers along that line and describe it as either being elastic or inelastic. So that's another cool thing that we can do even before we launch the product. And then I'm going to show you one other, I got plenty of time. One other neat thing that we can do with this. Go back to my slides. So since I have the part worths, I can also start to think about how much people would be willing to pay for different levels of attributes. And it's not uncommon that firms include the brand name of their products in a conjoint analysis, especially if I want to know what is the value of my brand name. I might want to know something about how much more someone is willing to pay for a computer that has this set of features if it's Dell than the computer if it's got the exact same features and it's a Hewlett-Packard. Because there might be a difference in people's desire to have an HP versus a Dell. And then we might see that people have different willingness to pay, which would tell me something about what the brand equity is. The strong, positive, unique associations, what is the value that people are willing to pay for those? And I can use conjoint analysis as a way to estimate this. And it's also not uncommon that when one brand is suing another brand for some sort of trademark infringement, either because of confusion or dilution, that is where customers are confused and they may have bought this brand thinking they were buying the other, and so that, we'll call them the stealing brand, has been able to trade off of the other brand's work. Or there might be some sort of dilution where now I've offered a product into the market that's damaged the other brand's value because people are getting lower quality thinking that they were getting a Dell, when in fact they were getting a Mel, which they thought was a Dell, and that damages the Dell brand. So how do we figure out what's the value of that? Well, conjoint analysis is often used in expert witness and trial situations to figure out what that value might be. And the way in which we would understand what people are willing to pay for this is we do this like this. So here I have information about what the utility is, the utils, the part worth associated with waiter and counter service. So let's imagine that for me, if I go into a restaurant and it's got waiter service, I'm up here, and if it turns out I have to go to a counter and carry my own tray, I'm a little bit less happy, and so I'm 1.28 utils less happy as a result of having counter service relative to waiter service. So how much would I be willing to pay in order to get the kind of service that I want? And so we answer that question by saying, well, how much would I pay for 1.28 utils of happiness? And the way in which I'm going to figure that out is I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at how much utility I get associated with changes in price. So I might be someone here, let's just say, this is cheaper, like food truck restaurant kind of thing. And here's my disutility for increasing price. From $6, I go to negative 1.165 less happy when it becomes $7.50, and then $9 I go to 2.33 utils less happy as that price has gone up. So given this information, how do I figure out what it is that I'm willing to pay for waiter service over counter service? How might I figure this out? So here's my part worth for $7.50. Here's my part worth for $9, negative 2.33. So as the price increases, I get less and less happy. But I actually have some information here because the price has gone up by how many dollars? $3, right? And I'm 2.33 utils less happy. So I can now figure out what is a util worth to me, right? And so $1 will buy me, if it's 2.33 utils for $3, right? So if you lower the price by $3, I'm 2.33 up here, 2.33 utils happier if you lower the price for $3. So for every dollar that you increase or lower the price, my happiness changes by 0.776 bits of happiness. So if $1 gets me 0.776 bits of happiness, and waiter service gets me 1.28 bits of happiness, I can just divide the waiter service by the 7.76 bits of happiness and estimate that it would be about $1.65 is how much more I would pay for waiter service relative to counter service. So what's nice about the output conjoint analysis is not only can I get estimates about market share and profitability, and not only can I get estimates of price elasticity, but I can also dig in and try to get estimates about what people are willing to pay, not only for whole alternatives, but what they're willing to pay for the different levels of the attributes, which might help me decide if I'm building an automobile, do I want to put more cup holders in? Well, how much more would people pay if I had more cup holders in the car? Or do I want to have a moonroof in? Well, how much are people willing to pay for a moonroof? Well, I can get estimates of this. What are they willing to pay for the different attributes using this information from the conjoint analysis? And just for you to play around with if you choose to, I also have in my data set the same information here. So here's me and all of my values that I place on each one of the attributes. And then this will just calculate it for us. So here for $10 or $15, you've got the difference in the part worths. So it's a $5 delta is what we had in the example we just used, from $15 down to 10. That's a change of $5. How much utility changes? 1.5 units of utility. So that means about 30 utils per dollar. Counter versus table service. I, in this case, like counter service more than table service. So the utils that I would pay is 0.2. That's how much less happy I am. So how much would I pay for one over the other? I just divide one by the other and I get 67 cents. I can do the same thing with how much would I pay for 15 minutes, or 5 minutes worth is 15 minutes, and if it's closer, I pay $2.11, or put another way, if the 15-minute away restaurant was more than $2.11 cheaper, I would be willing to go the 15 minutes in order to get that deal, because I like the money more than I dislike walking the long distance. And so that allows me to see how much people are willing to make that trade-off. Or put another way, how much higher price can I charge by being only 5 minutes away? The other restaurants out there are 15 minutes away. Up to $2.11 more before people start taking a hike and saying, well, I can get it cheaper down the road. Brian?
As a business owner, restaurant owner, unlikely to make decisions based on just your feedback, right? On one individual
Maybe not
customer,
one, yeah,
but
so,
like as a whole.
right, so if I do this for one person, I do this across people, and I can figure out what is the, two things. One, I could simply do an average, but when we work next week, we're gonna come together, we're gonna talk about pricing. I really don't wanna do averages, but what I can do is I can figure out the distribution of willingnesses to pay for each one of these attributes that I'm concerned about. So now I've got people who distribute it. Effectively, what I can do is develop a demand curve associated with that attribute. And if I've got the demand curve, I can now start to figure out what the optimal price is that will bring me the most possible profit. And we'll play around with that when we come back 2 weeks from now. Or how many weeks do we get back together? Whenever it is that we come back for the second time together, not tomorrow or the next day, but whatever the next time is, we'll be planning some.
Can you,
Yeah.
would you mind explaining the happiness and the utils once again, please? And also, my question is about when you're launching a product and you're creating a market, where do you actually start when you're strategizing your price? Like, you will take into account the cost, what is the cost that you're making a product, and you want to be profitable 30%, whatnot, right? What is the starting point? Because at this point, if you ask your customer, yes, they'll say, yes, I like a phone and I like a device with a phone and a computer, yes. I mean, do you understand, like, they cannot even tell you, how do you quantify these?
Yeah, so let's take it one step at a time. Your first question is, can you explain this happiness stuff?
Yes, yes.
Right? So let me do that. We'll talk again about doodles and happiness and what I'm talking about. And then let's get into how do we think about setting price when we've never been in the market. Those are two. So first with this piece, what have we estimated for each individual? The part worths that we have estimated allow us, we can put those pieces together depending upon the presence or absence of different levels of attributes. When we put them all together, we can add them up and figure out what the overall utility is or the overall rating estimate would be for that person. So I'm referring to that overall rating as an overall level of happiness or sadness depending upon the rating. We can refer to that as the overall value that someone places on that alternative, or sometimes the economists refer to it as utility. And then the economists will sometimes measure bits of utility in a currency they refer to as utils, U-T-I-L, utils. Who knows what util is? It's a little bit of value. And we can sort of think about that in the same way here. The part worths represent the little bits of utility that I get associated with the presence of each attribute, and when I put them all together, I get the overall utility, which is the rating for the alternative. So I have all of this data in terms of ratings of overall utility. I need to think about what it is that people are willing to pay to get particular levels of particular attributes. That's what I'm trying to do. And so since I have dollars represented here in terms of utility, here is if the price is $10, then my utility goes up by 0.772 relative to $12.50. Here is $15, my utility goes down 0.778. So I know something about my change in utility as a result of a change in $5. In fact, my utility changes by 1.5 points. I'm from here up to here if you lower the price by $5. And so if I know what that is, then I can figure out, well, how many utils do I get for $1? I get about 0.3 because it's $5 movement. $5 is what it costs to move me 1.5 utils, so $1 will move me 0.3. So I now know what $1 is worth in terms of utils, and I know that if you give me counter service rather than table service, I'm 0.2 utils happy. And so that's less than $1. In fact, it's 67% of $1. So 67 cents is how much I value getting the kind of service, counter service, more than table service. So I transformed the amount of preference, the amount of utility, the amount of happiness into a dollar figure. Just like when you traveled to Japan or to Europe and you had to use an exchange rate to figure out the value of a cup of coffee, it's the same thing that we're doing here, is we're using the exchange rate of utils per dollars to be able to figure out what these things are. Make sense?
Yes, but I think one assumption here is the utility is the same across all attributes. It can be different, right? I mean, my happiness factor for one attribute could be different from, and I mean, I may give a rating to an attribute at a certain level, but my rating for another attribute could be much different. But the assumption you're making is, let's quantify like how many utils I can purchase for $1, and then you're applying across all the attributes. Am I thinking right?
Yeah, I am doing that, and I don't think it's an entirely unreasonable thing to do, because where did this come from? It came from asking you about entire alternatives, right? So those were the things that you were making your ratings based on in the first place, were these very things. And then what I did was I decomposed the variance of the ratings using the ordinary least squares regression. And so I am making assumptions. This is the problem with the model. If you don't like it, I respect that you don't like it, means we're going to have to do something different. But I make assumptions when I use regression. I make assumptions of linearity. That is, that the relationship between the independent variable and the dependent variable is linear. And if I don't like linearity, I have to do something like change the functional form, or I use the dummy codes as another way to get around the linearity problem. I assume normality, right, which is assuming that the error, because I'm not always going to be perfect, but that the errors are normally distributed around each one of the estimates that I make. I assume homoscedasticity, which is at any point on the line that the amount of error is the same, right? So it's not any change. So these are assumptions that I make in the model, and if you assume that in reality, or you believe that in reality that this is not the case, we can make adjustments. And that might mean if you think that the utility that I put on some attributes, the way that I respond, is different than on other attributes, that might mean that there's an interaction term that I need to include in the model. I think that might cover it, and if that's the case, then we would be able to capture it that way. So it's all based on the assumption. And I'm 100% with you. If we develop a critical eye across this course and all of the courses, we know where to say, hey, there could be a problem here, and we're going to do something a little bit different because I don't like this model the way we're doing this. That's fabulous. That's going to be growth and learning for everybody. Okay, anything else? Anybody has questions? I think with only 10 minutes left, it doesn't make sense to start something entirely new. But what I will tell you is I'm going to post this. I posted the guide that gives directions for how we work through this problem. I've posted the homework under assignments that you can open up and take a look at it, at least read through and get with your team so you can pick a product that you want to work on. The assignment isn't due till a long time from now. In fact, I made it so that all of the assignments for this class are not due prior to the next time we meet, but rather after the next time we meet, which gives you one more opportunity to check in with me if you have questions That way, you've got the most flexibility, and you can get the most input to be able to get things done. And I want you to do well in everything in line, that's the best thing that can happen. And then the exam for this class won't be until after you come back from DC. We checked, because who was it that brought up about DC?
Yeah, I looked at it.
Yeah, and I checked with the program officers, not a problem. So, and I did that intentionally, even though I didn't do it intentionally. It turns out the exam is not until after DC, so there's time in order to study, and we can get together in virtual office hours if you need help. Tomorrow, we will get together again at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Tomorrow, we will talk about segmentation and targeting. We'll be thinking about some methods of segmentation. We will look at some geeky analysis on how to find segments of consumers using a variety of different clustering methods. And then when we talk about targeting, we're going to be working on in-class exercise that deals with recency, frequency, monetary value, which will help us think about which customers to target and which not, so that we can be as profitable as possible. If there's time, we'll look at targeting segments of one using collaborative filtering. And then on Friday, we will talk about how customers have value beyond just a single transaction. And we'll be looking at customer lifetime value, how we can go about estimating that, and spend a little bit of time talking about positioning and some of the methods in that. So we're going to keep having a good time together. We'll talk about theory, and we'll do lots of geeky exercises. So thanks for today. That gets us done. Do you mind 10 minutes early?
I was going to give me 1 unit of happiness. Actually, 10 noodles of happiness.
Thank you. Thank you. I thought that you were correct. I don't want the apple.
Yeah, I actually did that. It took me, I looked at how long it took me to take my 35 minutes. Yeah, it's just that, oh, you just gotta get through the
Financial statements.
I'm like super. I'm like the people who keep on last. So like I eventually you're just gonna be like, well, that's well, if no one wants to warm cold
well,
kind of associated with work and I didn't. That must be way more. Need help on this. I actually use that. I actually executed when I I put every price so even the first literally everything in sales, like selling price there, you guys got to show your price out, putting this in the second. That you are.
Is this useful for you?
I was.
Because you already have competitors, so you are going by their price.
I don't have competitors.
Yeah, we are coming here.
Exactly, it was, yeah.
So how are you determining your price, price bracket?
That's the industry.
So that means that's what I'm saying, so you are already basing it on
Comparative.
some comparison. That's what I'm saying. Compared with a completely new market.
No, not the market is not new. It's similar market, so a lot of adjacency and a lot of gaps. So what happens is a lot of work. My pricing model and on the impact.
What happened this morning, put it on your phone. I did, and I couldn't read it, so.
I prefer to do it generally. Basically what I want to say is the ones that are like
My models are based
But I feel like we should like different things, like.
No, I want to learn, so yeah. You are able to learn. Yeah, but me and tell me how this is and all that.
So pricing is my
forte.
Here's how you might be able to generate.
that's my
This person used to be a criminal. Dug into it. Oh my God. Here's how you. So.
Let me do a year real quick. Finance thing.
Oh, yeah.
Come back and. Was there a time or something? Yeah.
I hope so.
One minor trick here is.
Are we coming back here?
We're allowed to change these cells, but we don't want this to be 5, but it's gotta be 1 or 0. And it also has to be, it has to choose one of these options, it can't choose 2 of them. Can't choose 2 of these, can't choose 2 of these. So that just means adding some constraint. So I say, data and solver. So what I've actually done here is, see how I term that is, maximize this. And the way we do it is to make them 1s and 0s, I just said, you can change these values, and our values here, that's maximize this by changing these constraint. One constraint is those values have to be binary, so that means they can only be 0 and 1. And then there's also this other constraint that it's 072 to 076 have to be equal to 1. So what is 072 to 076?
Validation.
Yeah, it's just a validation that just adds up each of the cuisines. So if it adds up 0, 0, and 1, then that means equal to 1, so one of them is 1.
Okay.
So it just ensures that you've chosen 1 and not 2 or 3.
Yep.
And once you do that,
Got it.
when it's cycled. And I used the evolutionary method. There are other methods like nonlinear. The evolutionary method is the one that's the most robust. It's going to go through lots and lots of combinations. Because solver doesn't always check all of the possible options. Sometimes it looks for, we're coming up on a curve, for instance, and we're finding closer and closer to the point where there's less and less change, and then it starts to change in the other direction and it just stops.
Okay.
But the problem is that your curve could look like this, and it might get hung up over here rather than going even farther. And so different methods do different things, and particularly likely to get stuck when you're changing multiple variables at once. And so I did that, and then I want them to be not negative because I don't want it to be negative. So anyway, those are just extras.
All right.
So be aware, solver can sometimes glitch.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks a lot. I'm gonna save this, post it.